Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This evening, I'm going to be reacting to a video requested by Eddie Madsen 9655. It's called Marvel's The Punisher. The Man Comes Around. Made on the TheAlmightyLoli YouTube channel. Yes. If you guys want to check out my previous reaction to other of the TheAlmightyLoli review videos, remember that the reaction playlist card is going to be at the top right here. If you want to check out the original video as well as the TheAlmightyLoli's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, let's start with Marvel's The Punisher. The Man Comes Around. 3, 2, 1, go.
So we talked about one of the most famous comic book characters in history. As we seek deeper into spooky
Batman?
territory, I
I thought it would be Superman. Okay.
say we go a layer down into more disturbing and grim material. That's right, for this subscribe star request, we talk about another comic book character. This one exactly as famous as Batman, or infamous, depending on who you ask. Remember, CV Pacem Parabellum.
And what does that mean? Honestly, guys, I don't know anything about the Punisher. I've heard of the name, but I don't really know anything about this. It's a Marvel character, right? Marvel superhero character. I've never seen any movies or TV series related or having the Punisher in it. Yeah. But I have heard of the name. I just haven't seen any content around it.
Those who do evil to others, the killers, the rapists, psychos, sadists, you'll come to know me well.
The Punisher. That's right, it's finally time to talk about probably my favorite Marvel character out there. So the Punisher barely needs an introduction. Much like Batman, his fame is so widespread that it's borderline impossible not to find a guy who hasn't at least heard of the basics of who Frank Castle is and why he wears the skull. A veteran shortly returned from war who loses his family as collateral damage during a mob hit gone wrong. Left traumatized and failed by the justice system, Frank becomes a one-man war on crime, ruthlessly hunting down the men who killed his family and brutally executing them.
How did the justice system fail in finding the culprits who killed his family exactly? How did the police and the investigators fail? Hopefully they're going to explain that to us. And yeah, it's just hard to believe, really. Unless, of course, whoever killed his family are connected to, like, the underworld. And they must have had some sort of influence on the police and the justice system. Yeah.
Moving on from them to becoming a symbol of fear to those who do evil unto others. Now, Punisher's had a lot of different renditions for his lore, much like Batman. He's had a lot of different tones and perspectives that shift who he is and what he stands for. He's been a total lunatic that kills anyone who even slightly breaks the law, to jaywalking, to just talking to criminals. He's been a broken, traumatized mess taking his anger out on the world, while using the death of his family as an excuse to never stop waging war. He even...
Wow, okay. That's all over the place. After having your family being murdered, now everybody is a target. No matter the degree of the crime, you're a target.
sometimes play nice with other Marvel characters, forging uneasy alliances that can go wrong at the drop of a hat. Frank, despite the simplicity of his character, is actually a pretty complex guy, and what makes it funny is how he fits in with the rest of the Marvel universe. The guy isn't superpowered, he doesn't have enhanced reflexes or super strength, he doesn't even have access to advanced technology like Bruce Wayne. Frank, on every level, is an outlier in Marvel. The guy just sticks out like a sore thumb, from his looks to his demeanor. Now, Punisher started off, funny enough, as a Spider-Man villain. His first appearance was in The Amazing Spider-Man 129, where he was manipulated into hunting after Spider-Man by the Jackal. This is not long after the death of Gwen Stacy and Green Goblin, so Spider-Man is not popular at the moment, and Punisher assumes him to just be another costumed thug in a city full of them. though they are eventually able to come to terms with each other, Punisher realizing that Jackal used him to kill Spider-Man for his own gain, and the two go their separate ways. The Jackal's plan is foiled, but he's already coming up with more schemes on how to get rid of Peter for good. So when Frank was first introduced, he was a relatively thin character. He's a misguided vigilante that is manipulated into trying to kill Peter. A good contrast considering one of the biggest events of Spider-Man history happened just a few issues beforehand. Gwen Stacy's death, and the original Green Goblin seemingly dying, his death blamed on Spider-Man. The point is to show the difference between Peter, who refuses to kill, and someone like Frank. A guy completely at peace with killing and showing a sort of bad future for Spider-Man if he followed that same road, just operating off pure hatred and vengeance that can easily be misdirected by a more nefarious party. The Punisher for a long time would be little more than a recurring villain for various superheroes to fight, mostly Spider-Man as he debuted in his stories, though he also showed up in Daredevil and Captain America as well. But Frank would eventually become so popular that he spawned his own independent comic series as well. The 1986 run of The Punisher is his first solo run of comics, exploring the depths of Frank's character and giving you more insight into who he is as a man. He's not just a gun-toting lunatic. The guy is disgusted at the state of the world, burned out by his time in Vietnam, which was only made worse by the death of his family not long after returning home. He's seen the worst of humanity and was failed on every level by the justice system. From the police to the courts, even superheroes failed him. Nobody was there to stop the death of his family. He was left alone, holding their bodies, and he never saw justice for them.
So now he will take justice in his own hands and become a vigilante.
Punisher, when he first debuted, was a very controversial character. At the time, having a character kill that wasn't explicitly a bad guy was still pretty taboo, which is actually pretty funny when we look back at some of the classic comic characters and see how often they drop bodies. Like Conan, The Shadow, even the earliest versions of Batman whacked people. But due to increasing censorship and stuff like the Comics Code Authority, the idea of letting a character kill and be considered the hero was pretty edgy. His solo run embodied that well, covering themes of suicide, torture, prostitution. It even straight up kills a child. Now,
Wow.
it's still pretty tame compared to later renditions, but the point stands that Frank has always been a gritty character. His name
Wait, his name is Frank? Okay. AKA the Punisher. Okay.
anti-hero through and through, the pure embodiment of chaotic good. If he views you as evil, he will come for you. His main purpose when he first appeared was to contrast his code with other characters, show what happens when you go too far or give in to your baser instincts. Despite technically being an anti-hero, he was basically a villain for a long time. But over time, as more people took over the character and explored his psychology, he had more of a definitive understanding of why he does what he does. Some are definitely better than others. You can always tell when a writer takes over that downright despises Frank and his methods. That's when you get Judge Dredd Frank, where he's so psychotic about his war on crime, he shoots jaywalkers. Now,
why would writers who despise Frank and his way of doing things take up the job to write a story about the Punisher? Why would you do that? Why would you want to sabotage a Marvel character and not focus on characters that you do like and that you do support? Why don't you just go to those ones and let those who understand the Punisher and his background and his morals or his code or his ethics, his psychological background, why don't you let writers who understand that take the job? Interesting.
it's easy to write off Frank as just a maniac, a mass-murdering gunman that holds zero regard for human life. In fact, a lot of modern Marvel does exactly that. Marvel in recent years seems downright embarrassed of Punisher, doing what they can to shove him into deeper corners and act like he doesn't exist. There's a few different reasons for this, such as Marvel's increased focus on appealing to children after the MCU exploded, meaning an explicitly adult-focused character wouldn't work for stories that are meant to be given to 12-year-olds.
I mean, they should have done that. Have that sort of variety. You can have the MCU that is focused on children, and you can have the MCU that is focused on children that are growing into teenagers and into young adults who would want something a bit more dark, more edgy, more grounded in reality. You know, instead of all of this hope and heroism and, you know, the usual things that we're seeing in these superhero movies and TV shows and comics. You know, let's have someone who kills. Let's have someone who's controversial. Let's have someone who is, you know, He is a hero. Is a hero that acts in an unorthodox manner. He's not the type of hero that's going to capture you and take you to prison. No, he's going to shoot you in the face. So yeah, let's have those types of heroes as well. That type of anti-hero, as TheAlmightyLoli says about the Punisher, that he's an anti-hero. So let's have those types of characters.
Others argue there's political motivation behind it, that Frank is an innately Republican character, and the more left-leaning
Republican? How?
bent on the company's incompatible with someone as grim as Punisher. A silly explanation, but I'll explain later that it's actually not completely wrong. The final reason is, funny enough, pretty simple, and that's Marvel doesn't know what to do with Frank. He's a character with sharp edges to him, and I don't mean that in an ironic sense. He's genuinely hard to write and make interesting for multiple reasons. Not only do you have to get into the mind of a man that is bitter with the world in a way that he is, but you have to factor in his military history, his lack of power and resources. I mean, the guy's a pure underdog character. The key to his stories is how he's able to outsmart his opponents and use his lack of powers to his advantage. Contrary to how he looks, Frank isn't just power and muscle. He's terrifyingly intelligent, able to figure out people and strategize his fights in a way that many writers still can't fully grasp.
I mean, he is a Vietnam. What do they call him again? I forgot. But he is a soldier. A veteran, yes, that's the word I'm looking for. He's a veteran of the Vietnam War. He survived through that entire ordeal. So yes, he has to be someone who is quick on his feet, who is able to use human psychology in his battles against other human beings. And of course, be proficient in using weapons. So yeah. It's not really a surprise if you know the background of someone who is a military veteran. Yeah.
Just don't know what to do with Frank, so they toss him into different gimmicks to see what happens. You had Frankencastle, a consequence of the Civil War event where Wolverine's son Dakin murders Punisher, and he's revived as an undead Frankenstein's monster that fights other monsters. He's been Cosmic Ghost Rider, he's had the Iron Man armor. Whenever Marvel runs out of ideas, Frank can get as bad as Miles Morales with the whole what if he had other characters' powers deal. There's also that time they basically made him Spawn where he's given angel Uzis and had to fight demons. That was stupid. The point is that not a lot of writers really get Frank. They know he's a big scary guy that shoots criminals, but beyond that, they sort of struggle. You've had great stories with him, sure. Circle of Blood's killer, War Journal's fucking classic. I actually kind of dig the Rucka run, but more often than not, Punisher feels chained. Like there's more that can be done, but it just can't hit as high as it could. And
that's why I'm saying maybe it needs someone, like the Punisher, it needs a writer who actually can get this character. And not just picking anyone to write a story about the Punisher. It needs someone who has, experience on the battlefield, someone who is a veteran probably from any sort of conflict, or someone who understands, the legal systems of the United States of America and how justice can be evaded by criminals, and that type of psychology connected to that sort of injustice. All of those types of interesting points that would make the Punisher a compelling character, or should I say Frank as a compelling character. What motivates him to do the things that he does? What are the trigger points? What has built him up to this point? All of those things are also, very important foundation blocks for the character. And from that, you can continue and create stories on the criminal underworld. He doesn't have to be fighting the superheroes all the time. He doesn't have to have superhero powers, but he can be fighting the criminal underworld, things that you don't necessarily see in the comic books or in the TV shows or the movies, where you're dealing with human trafficking, you're dealing with drug trafficking, you're dealing with other forms of criminal activity that you don't necessarily see, but it's there, and Frank can be the one to clean it out. Yeah.
that's where a certain Irishman comes in. Yeah, Garth Ennis. Now, Garth Ennis is a controversial guy in comics. He's made a career out of very cynical, dark stories that can range from pleasantly grim to downright sadistic. Though most people probably know him as the creator of The Boys, the comic that the show on Amazon that can't shut the fuck up about Trump
Oh, really? He created The Boys?
every 5 minutes is based on. Though he's also famous for creating Preacher, one of the more well-known indie comic series out there, along with writing The Darkness, the comic that inspired the game series that was tragically murdered before we got a third entry. I'm still mad. Garth Ennis is a genuinely great comic writer, and he's actually got more under his belt than you might realize. His Hitman series is fantastic, and ended up creating one of the more underrated DC characters out there. But Ennis sort of, well... okay. He kinda suffered the baby with the bathwater syndrome in recent years. For a while now, we've been subject to the era known as superhero deconstruction, taking the idea of traditional heroes and warping them to be darker, edgier, or more unpleasant. This is off the heels of stuff like Watchmen, which was all about popping the bubble on superhero idealism and showing them as flawed, sometimes terrible people. This worked as the exception to the rule, that you get this bitter pill in between issues of Superman saving cats from trees, or Daredevil helping a lady cross the street. But off the heels of the MCU, with the revitalized interest in superheroes, you had to push once again for darker, more fucked up stories of people in capes and spandex. Some of this has actually been persisting ever since Watchmen. I mean, you have stuff like The Brat Pack, or obviously The Boys. Some of this ended up creating pretty awful trends in the medium that are still going to this day, like showing superheroes as just petty assholes for no real reason beyond going, but it's realistic, right? Hell, look at how many people defended stuff like Captain Marvel beating the shit out of a guy for telling her to smile, or cheered on She-Hulk being a complete asshole to pretty much everyone in her show. It's taking people that are heroic and turning them into vain pricks, all while just screaming that it's realistic, even though it's really not. This is all dead horse stuff because people have been complaining about it for that long. It's been years, decades if you want to get technical. Nobody likes it, but time and time again you have some jagoff get into the writer's room that thinks they're the next Alan Moore. Now, understanding what made stuff like Watchmen work the way it did, which even then is debated back and forth among fans to this day, but Garth Ennis sorta contributed to this trend. His stories are dark, deeply cynical, and almost always had a rebellious air to them. He plays by his own rules and does his own thing, just let him smash his toys together in the way he likes. Sometimes you get crossed, sure, but other times you get something truly special. Preacher holds up to this day, and his Hitman run is something you should really sit down to read, since it actually dispels a lot of the myths about the guy. There's a common misconception that Ennis despises superheroes, which a lot of people see as inspiration behind The Boys, just venting about the industry and holding a middle finger to the whole genre. That's actually not true, but it's a rumor that's held strong for so long a lot of people buy into it without question. Even I believed it wholeheartedly when I was younger. Hell, there's even a rumor that he hated Stan Lee himself, which, no, he didn't. But over time, as you read more of his work, you understand the actual thinking of the guy. Ennis doesn't hate superheroes. If anything, he truly does like them. It's just he hates how persistent they are in the comic book medium. Other genres were completely choked out by the dominance of superheroes. Horror comics, pulp crime stories, war series, all these genres were snuffed out as the big two formed. It's why he has strong feelings on Captain America. He sees the idea of Captain America being used as a vehicle to tell war stories as basically a cynical way of rewriting history and adding fantasy where it doesn't belong. He grew up reading stories about war in comics, where there weren't any superheroes, it was adaptations of actual military conflicts. So seeing Captain America be shoved in just as a way to, let's be point blank here, sell it to children, it rubbed him the wrong way. Obviously, you can disagree. Captain America is a massively popular character in spite of Ennis's opinion, even among the military. But the point is to show his mindset. Ennis grew up in Ireland during the Troubles, so war and conflict to him is something that was intimate and terrifying. It's partly why he has an affinity for the military and military history. That and him growing up reading these war comics during his childhood. He actually didn't start reading superheroes until his teenage years. Honestly, I think if he was given the chance to write Captain America and really dig into Steve Rogers, he might come to understand why he resonates so well with people. He's essentially Marvel's Superman, a character Ennis genuinely likes and has said multiple times is one of his favorite superheroes. But who knows, this isn't really the point of the video. The point is that when the push for superhero cynicism started to ride on people's nerves, mainly when The Boys show got insanely preachy and ironically drifted further from the comics, Ennis was one of the big names on the chopping block.
You know, I haven't actually watched The Boys. I think I watched 1 or 2 episodes of The Boys. I remember there was a speedster who crashed into a lady and, you know, she blew up into into like a bloody mist, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. But yeah, after that, I just didn't really take interest in watching it. I don't know. I think I just tapped out of superhero content. I think the only superhero content that I really completed was a cartoon one called Invincible. Yeah, the first season, I enjoyed it. The second season took a bit of time, you know, to come onto onto show, so I kind of lost interest. I lost interest in watching it any further after season 1. So yeah, really, like The Boys, what was it? The Flash. All of these superhero TV shows, I just never got vested into watching them religiously like other people. I know they exist, but I'm just not interested in that type of content. No, yeah.
As stated, this is an opinionated, edgy writer that has some hot takes regarding comics and some very popular characters in said comics. And let's be honest here, he's also the kind of writer where you either love everything he does, or you wouldn't piss on the man if he was on fire. And now you have people screaming for the world to go back to fun, good-natured superhero stories. Yeah, it was never gonna mesh. Hell, you're probably gonna see a ton of takes out there saying that he was never good and none of his comics were worth reading, which is bullshit. It's simply going from one extreme to the other. I won't defend Crossed simply because I thought it sucked, and there's only like 2 or 3 good stories in that series. But I'll absolutely defend something like The Boys, Preacher, The Darkness, Hitman. There's a lot of stuff to enjoy, but most importantly, his Punisher run. You see, Garth Ennis took over writing Punisher for a quick little miniseries, Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. It was a satirical joke story about Frank Castle single-handedly killing every known character for 1995. He left.
Oh wow, that sounds interesting. Because all of these superheroes have got powers. How does he kill, an individual superhero? Like for instance, Wolverine. How does he kill him? Exactly. How does he kill Jean? How does he kill what's his name again with the eyes? Cyclops, I think his name is Cyclops. I forgot his name. You know, the guy with the laser eyes. How does he kill him? How does he kill Xavier? Xavier can read his mind, can enter into his mind. How does he kill Magneto with a gun? This is interesting. I actually want to see the comic of this, storyline of the Punisher killing the Marvel superheroes. I'm not sure about the villains, but yeah, the heroes. How did he kill each and every single one of them? What type of plans did he initiate to kill a superhero?
Marvel not long after, since he found out the editorial team changed around dialogue without his knowledge or permission, but later came back to write Frank for the Marvel Knights run of comics. Marvel Knights was a strange beast. It was, on paper, a street-level team of superheroes made up of Daredevil and other various darker-type Marvel characters. In practice, it was more like independent series for each character that occasionally crossed over. It was also, once again, considerably darker, pushing the edges of depictions of violence and subject matter. Of course, this is the same series that gave us Angel Uzi's Punisher, so it wasn't perfect. And funny enough, this failed storyline is what Garth Ennis the chance to reboot Frank, with the classic storyline, Welcome Back Frank, showing Punisher returned to New York as his old self and making each gang in the city intimately aware he's there to stay. The Knights run was a wild success once it got off the ground, bringing the Punisher back into the mainstream and giving him some iconic moments and elements that are still referenced in Punisher media to this day, like the iconic Russian, a massive hitman that can easily beat Frank in a straight-up fight. But after September 11th, Ennis
The Russian.
decided to reboot the character again. You see, his run of Marvel Knights had a lot of dark and sometimes goofy humor in it. He poked fun at other heroes, used cartoon logic more than once, and essentially used Frank as like the straight man to the insanity of the Marvel Universe. But after 9/11, Ennis went to explore the character in a more somber manner, so Punisher Max was launched. The Max label is an interesting aspect of Marvel you don't hear too much about. Essentially, it's R-rated Marvel. Characters are completely taken off the leash and given free reign to be as brutal, vulgar, or horrifying as they want. This actually led to the creation of Alias, the series that went on to be adapted as Jessica Jones on Netflix. Other characters received their own Max label series, like Blade, Black Widow, Deadpool. Nick Fury also has his own series of Max comics you should really sit down to read. And guess who wrote those? Yeah, it was Ennis. Honestly, giving Ennis a character that is the embodiment of cold military-style violence and tell him to go nuts with no restrictions sounds like a perfect match for his style. And it kinda was, yeah. Punisher Max is still, to this day, one of the definitive stories for the Max label. What started off as essentially a shameful experiment by Marvel, Stan Lee was openly against the creation of Max and thought it was a terrible idea, ended up propelling the company into not just the mainstream, but ended up becoming some of the most popular comics they were putting out. Punisher Max is widely considered the definitive run of the character, a far more cold, ruthless Frank that tackles increasingly fucked up and deranged villains that push the definition of human as far as it can go. It's a very unpleasant read. No story has a happy ending, the best you get are satisfying conclusions. The only real way things can end in a good way is if everyone involved is dead, and that's usually what happens.
Yeah, this is the type of variety that the public who consume this content need. I mean, we're not always going to be happy with the day being saved by a superhero and, happy ending and rainbows and sunshine and, just this very utopian existence where the superheroes are never wrong. The superheroes are always there to save your life, to save the day. Even with all their hardships, somehow they still make it, and the earth continues to spin, you know, without a care. No. We need other content that delves deeper into far darker moments, things that are far more unexpected and shocking, especially as you grow older. As you get into a older teenager, going into young adult and a fully fledged adult, in the type of world that we live in the type of information that we consume, and the reality that we exist in. It's not like the comic books. It's not like with the superheroes always saving the day. There's none of that. You know, our reality is very dark, very painful, and sometimes we would need content that mirrors that type of reality. And if the Max comics can kind of give us that sort of imitation of it, it's another form of entertainment that people will enjoy consuming. It's not a bad idea, definitely.
It's incredibly misanthropic and isn't shy to talk about subject matter that makes you feel like you need a shower at the end. That's not to say it's completely joyless. Max still has a lot of that cynical black humor that Ennis is known for, and you do occasionally see glimpses of light in the darkness, but Punisher Max as a story is painted by Frank's perspective. He sees the world as irredeemable in a place of unending bleak misery, so even the few happy moments are twinged by his cynical nature. But that's fitting for this version of Frank Castle. The Max label changes a lot of rules for Punisher. For one, there's no presence of other superheroes or anyone with supernatural powers. It's just fucked up people killing other fucked up people. Frank also has aged in real time. When the run began, it was 2004, so he's in his 60s around the time Max opens. He's been Punisher for 30 years, and the world has sort of grown used to him. The criminals keep their heads down, and the police do their best to ignore him. It's a very interesting take on the world. You'd think it would sound boring not having any other character that can come in and shake things up, and to be fair, you do get appearances by Nick Fury, who's awesome, but what keeps Max interesting is Frank himself. The way he's written as this shell of a man who's just repeating these habits until the day he dies. He knows that he doesn't have to be the Punisher anymore. The men who killed his family are long dead. It's been 30 years since he lost them, so any idea that he's doing this to avenge his wife and children is simply cope. He keeps killing simply out of hatred. Hatred towards the monsters that continue to victimize others, who make the world such an awful, fucked up place. The human traffickers that enjoy kidnapping and raping women, the child molesters who exploit their own.
And I was just talking about this. I was just talking about this, that, Frank doesn't have to be like the other superheroes saving the day against supervillains. No, let his character deal with far darker, situations in the criminal underworld that exists in our real world. Things that deal with drugs, things that deal with trafficking, things that deal with Grand Theft Auto, things that deal with government corruption, and how all of these criminal syndicates are interconnected with one another, along with the government, along with the justice system, along with the political apparatus of society. There's so much to explore into that type of criminal underworld, things that super villains can never give you. Their ambitions and their violence is very, how can I say this? Is this something that you would not see in the real world? Their form of violence, their form of ambitions to rule over the earth or to extract some sort of power from a superhero. Yeah, those types of storylines are just things that are not tangible in our real world. But if Frank or the Punisher can focus on things that are tangible in our real world, things that we see, things that we understand, things that we experience, it's good. It's good entertainment.
Own children for sick pleasure, the gangsters that talk about honor and loyalty one day, then murder each other for little more than a chance to seize that much more power. Frank, at his core, is a man that hates the world because he loves it. There's a reason so many people compare Batman and the Punisher, because they have very similar ideals as to why they do what they do. Bruce Wayne fights crime because he truly sees a chance for Gotham to change, to prevent what happened to him from happening to anyone else. He doesn't want to see women and children victimized by crime. Frank Castle is very similar. Frank despises seeing the innocent suffering. He truly feverishly hates it. The quickest way to stoke his anger is to be a complete sadist against a civilian that can't fight back. Some of his most vicious moments come from when he gets his hands on somebody that simply torments others because they like it, or feels nothing when they kill even children. The difference obviously comes from the mindset. Batman doesn't kill because deep down, he still has that childish idealism in his heart, that the world could get better if it had someone to inspire them. He would terrify criminals, but also be a symbol of hope for the innocent. This stems from the fact Bruce Wayne was raised by Alfred after the death of his parents, who told him stories of the great things his parents wanted to achieve and instill a strict moral code into Bruce he wanted to aspire to. Frank didn't have that. More specifically, Frank's sense of idealism was already burned away in Vietnam, or whatever conflict he fought in depending on the run you read, but for Max specifically it was Vietnam. Frank wasn't just a soldier. He was picked for special forces, implied to be some form of Maxog, trained to be an assassin by the government and seeing the darkest parts of the war, losing his humanity in the process. His one tie to the world is his family, the one thing he has to keep him grounded, and then the picnic in the park happened. Now, Frank is like a ghost, an absolute revenant that haunts the world, gunning for the worst of the worst without a shred of hesitation or mercy. Really, it's not far off from the truth to view the Max version of Frank as like an Old West gunslinger. He feels like a man removed from his time and plopped in a different world. He essentially is, in a way. With him being the Punisher for 30 years, you've had an entire generation grow up hearing stories of the guy. The people he's killed, how he seems to be able to get to anybody, and the pure cruelty he inflicts on those he guns after. But you see, deep down, Frank has a code. Hell, he doesn't even try to hide it. He refuses to kill the innocent in any form, and he shows multiple moments where you see his sense of empathy is not completely dead. He still holds the classic style morality: shoot the outlaw in the head, save the guy he was robbing. Now, I could keep going, but all I'll say is Max is an incredible read. Granted, I think it goes on for maybe an arc or two too long, but the highs far outweigh the negatives, and Max ended up being so popular that it's still kinda going to this day, just in more limited forms. A few miniseries here and there, like The Platoon or Get Fury. These are great reads you should check out. You definitely won't regret it. It's not a happy story, but Punisher fans are already well acquainted to the darkness that comes with the character, so it's easy to prep for. But be warned nonetheless, because stuff like the Slavers isn't going to leave your head anytime soon. Still, you get the point. Punisher is a long-running character that really hit his stride once Garth Ennis took over, who turned him from just a gun-toting guy that occasionally yelled at Spider-Man into this very bitter, tragic man. Hell, this version of Frank becomes so popular that he ended up being adopted by the military in a way. Chris Kyle's unit adopted the Punisher skull as their emblem, even calling themselves the Punishers. They were massive fans of the character and helped popularize Frank among the military. There's a reason you see so many camo hats with that skull on it when you go to an army surplus store. And if you don't believe me that this is the definitive version of Frank, well, I guess we can talk about some of the adaptations. That's right, the Punisher has had more than a few attempts to bring him out of comics into the world of video games, cartoons, anime, and movies. The games vary. He has some appearances, like famously his Capcom beat-em-up game. Also, he's in Ultimate Alliance 3. He was in that Marvel Heroes game before that was taken offline. And most famously, he was in the PS2 Punisher game created by Volition. This game, by the way, is...
There was a PS2 Punisher game? Huh.
Fucking awesome. Find a way to emulate it. It's absolutely badass. The anime appearances are due to the Marvel animated universe, sort of like the Pepsi to DC's Coke. I'll go into more detail if I ever talk about the Marvel animated movies, but for now I want to stick to live action adaptations. Specifically, the movie trilogy. And
There's 3 movies based on the Punisher. Wow. Okay. Never seen them, but interesting.
His appearance in the Netflix universe. Now, I call it a movie trilogy, but they're more completely unrelated films using different actors and pretty much zero reference to each other.
Oh, okay.
The first one is the 1989 film starring Dolph Lundgren. This is...
Dolph? Dolph Lundgren was the Punisher? Really? Nice.
Long before the Max era print, so this is based purely off the Circle of Blood War Journal era of Frank. Now, to get it out of the way, this isn't really a Punisher movie. It's only tangentially related to the character and makes some massive deviations.
Oh. Well, you still get the title as the Punisher.
Such as making Frank a homicide detective whose family is killed in a car bomb. He's
Dolph.
still a former Marine, but it's a far cry from his actual origin story. Freshly returned home from a deployment where his family's killed at a picnic in the park. He also never wears the skull, which is strange. His knives have them, but he never wears the iconic skull symbol on his shirt or body armor at any point. Dolph Lundgren himself never really feels like Frank Castle either. He feels like Dolph Lundgren, which is
I mean, it's Dolph. Of course, he himself would overpower any character that he would be acting as. I'm sorry. I mean, this man's face is so well known and recognized. Okay, maybe by me. I don't know, but by other people. But by me, I know this guy. In almost all the action movies I've been watching ever since I was a young child, he's been there. He's been there. Yeah.
probably the best way to describe the movie. It's more of a Dolph Lundgren flick than adaptation to a comic character. The movie itself is a decent 80s action flick. It's cheesy, sure, but it personally never crossed the line into being full-blown unwatchable. If anything, the movie has a pretty solid cult following because of this. I think
I'm gonna watch this movie. Yeah, I need to watch it.
I don't care for it, but a lot of that's because I genuinely would have liked a more fitting adaptation to Punisher. Granted, I understand why they couldn't exactly nail him all the way back in 1989. Frank's identity was still being batted around by Marvel, and comic book movies weren't really given the respect they were eventually given in the 2000s. Hell, the only ones that were really seen as respected back then were Tim Burton's Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman. Still, the movie has some fun sequences to it. I'd be lying if I said this was completely irredeemable. It's a fun enough action movie. The problem is that this isn't really an adaptation of anything. It just kind of wears the name. So fans of the character could be miffed by all the changes and feel like it's just wearing a symbol instead of actually adapting anything. Now that's the Dolph Lundgren movie. The next adaptation, well, that's a different story. You see, in 2004, hot off the heels of Marvel Knights and Max, you had the Thomas Jane movie, and this... oh boy. This one is fucking good. I can't even try to hide my bias for the film. This is a fantastic adaptation of Punisher.
Really?
Before we go any further, let me set the stage a bit for the time frame this movie came out. You see, comic book movies have existed for decades. As stated, you had Superman films all the way back in the 70s, but it was a very hit-and-miss genre. Some studios understood the goldmine they were sitting on with the material, while others very clearly didn't give a shit. However, the early 2000s led to a new focus on adapting these stories into film. You had the X-Men movies, the Blade movies, and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. The latter of which were monstrous successes and would eventually go on to kind of be the bedrock for the MCU. Now, it's not the first MCU movie, technically. Blade from 1998 was the first MCU-style
Loved it.
movie as we know it today, proudly wearing the Marvel label and getting the public interested in seeing more comic characters receiving these high-budget, refined films, instead of the wonkier titles that came out beforehand. Now, Michael Jai White's Spawn isn't awful,
Never heard of it.
but it's nowhere near the peak of what comic book movies could have become, which was a common sentiment. If there was just a bit more refinement, a bit more care, more love for the source material, well then Blade came out. X-Men films continued the trend, first one coming out in 2000, also to roaring success. Now the public had two massive comic book movies that got them more feverish for Marvel and anything they could get their hands on.
Money well spent watching those movies. Definitely. Those franchise movies, the X-Men and Blade, perfect.
Which is when they got a bright idea. Why not adapt one of the most popular and iconic characters? This is where Sam Raimi steps up. You see, Sam Raimi is a massive Spider-Man fan and wanted to make movies that felt like the classic Amazing Spider-Man comics he read as a kid. The previous movies were popular. People still quote Blade to this day, in fact.
Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?
And hold a lot of nostalgia for the first X-Men film. But Spider-Man is when it all kicked into overdrive. The impact the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film had on Marvel films can still be felt to this day. Hell, any Spider-Man game that comes out uses some variation of the Danny Elfman score from the films. Once again, this dude changed the landscape on superhero soundtracks. He did it for Batman and he did it for Spider-Man. And these films became such a hit that it led to Marvel looking into adapting other characters, fully committed to riding this gravy train as far as it could go, and as we saw, it could go pretty fucking far. You got sequels to Spider-Man, Blade, a Hulk movie that's... I kinda liked it.
Yeah, it was okay. I think I just fell asleep a few times with the Hulk movie. But yeah, it was good towards the end. In the beginning, it was a slow burn.
And most importantly for this video, a film about The Punisher. So 2004 Punisher is essentially a full-blown reboot of the character, exploring a new origin for Frank and putting him in a new setting. His original home is New York City, while the 2004 film puts him in Miami. The film also takes a lot of influence from spaghetti westerns, painting Frank as a sort of man-with-no-name style gunslinger. The soundtrack also has clear Ennio Morricone influence, a lot of brass instruments and sounding like something you would hear in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. God, remember when Marvel movies could, be inspired by stuff and be creative? It also changes how his family is killed. Instead of his wife and children being collateral damage in a mob hit, they are specifically targeted for death after a failed undercover operation results in the death of Howard Saint's son. Howard Saint being the primary antagonist for the film, played by the great John Travolta. Enraged by this, Saint orders Castle's entire bloodline to be killed, tracking him and his family down to Reunion in Puerto Rico, resulting in everyone Frank knows and loves being executed. Left for dead and filled with rage, Frank begins his quest to tear apart Saint's life. Now, 2004.
Okay, I think I need to watch this movie too. I need to watch this movie as well. Okay, wow.
Punisher is a more slow-paced affair than you might think, especially for a comic book movie. There's a lot of time taken to set up events and characters and build up to the violence. Something that actually rubbed people the wrong way when this movie came out. You see, when this was released, 2004 Punisher was ravaged by critics, and even some.
Wow. But luckily, I don't adhere to what critics think. I'm still gonna watch it.
Fans. They called it boring, saying it was a shit adaptation to Punisher, and complained there was too much humor. The last complaint is ironic, for multiple reasons. If only they knew what was on the horizon.
Yikes.
Still, I clearly disagree with all these complaints. I think the movie isn't just good, but easily one of the best comic book adaptations out there. And funny enough, one of the closest adaptations to Punisher. You see, a lot of complaints come down to a fundamental misunderstanding of Punisher and what the movie was going for. Yeah, it's slow-paced, because Frank isn't like Peter Parker. It's not about wacky hijinks and Willem Dafoe threatening to beat him up for lunch money. Frank is a very somber character, a man defined by tragedy. Even the other R-rated Marvel character movies that came out at the time, well, the one, Blade, didn't have the same tone. Blade's more of a fist-pumping, high-adrenaline action movie, seeing Wesley Snipes kick vampire ass to techno music, you know. Punisher isn't that. He's a guy that deep down isn't very fun. He's a guy that lost his family to mob violence, struggles with PTSD, and vents out his hatred of criminals in an unhealthy way, though he considers the matter debatable. Obviously, that doesn't mean you can't have fun with Punisher. He has a ton of fun stories. It's just that when you break the guy down to his core, it's sad. Frank shouldn't be doing what he's doing because the situation shouldn't get to a point where he feels like he has to. People know it, other Marvel characters know it, even he knows it, but it's not going to change anytime soon. So for the 2004 film to be this slow-paced, borderline character study of Frank Castle on his quest for vengeance, yeah, it fits perfectly, especially with a phenomenal performance by Thomas Jane. Even after all these years with different actors taking up the mantle, I still consider Jane to be the best possible choice for Punisher. He just understands the guy to a degree that I have not seen replicated, able to show a vulnerability of Frank that still feels organic to the character, and his cold, deadpan style of talking is pretty much exactly how I view Frank's voice as I read it. He even has a dry wit to him, making sarcastic observations and blunt turns of phrase that fit the guy like a glove.
Shouldn't play with knives.
One of the best scenes is when he interrogates one of Saint's lower-rank guys where he pretends to blowtorch his back. That's exactly something Frank would do to get in a guy's head. Now, the lower-end guy is actually an interesting figure since he's part of the direction the film was pointed at. You see, the Punisher film originally was going to be far larger in scope, but it had to be cut down due to budget and time issues. You were originally going to have a whole sequence in the beginning detailing Frank's time in Kuwait before he joined the FBI, but this was scrapped because they just didn't have the money for it, though this was sort of brought back with the animated short that was included in the director's cut. Still, the mob guy that Frank tortures is Mickey, based on Mickey Fundozzi, a character from Punisher War Journal, though he's changed for the movie, and he essentially is meant to be like Microchip, a long-running character that serves as one of Punisher's few concurrent allies. You see, they included Mickey instead of Microchip.
Microchip. Huh. Is he like the IT expert for the Punisher?
Because the director didn't like the idea of including the latter in the film. He didn't want to touch on the high-tech aspects of Punisher, no battle van, no gimmick weapons. He wanted Frank to feel like an underdog that's outsmarting his opponents instead of relying on cheap tricks. And
that's good. I like that. I really do like that.
Personally, I fully agree with this direction. For one, the movie nails the skulking predator vibe of Frank, how he's able to infiltrate an area, gather intel on his enemies, and come up with long-scale plans. It's all perfect. Keeping Frank grounded, especially for his debut film, is a great choice. Hell, that was literally the entire point of Max in the first place, which was the era of Punisher the public knew at this point in time. because the 2000s era Punisher was a different beast to his 80s one. Nobody questions Punisher having branded knives or explosive remote cars in a Lundgren movie, because that's just sort of what the era of Punisher was back then. But the Jane movie is based on far more realistic material, and I put that in quotes. I mean, it's still pulpy, it's still over the top, but it's more real. It has to keep the moments where things go insane to a minimum and make the most of each scene, such as the famous Russian scene when the Russian, an antagonist from the Knight's Run, comes
he's in the movie
to kill Frank. This scene is probably one of the most iconic of the film. It's an amazingly choreographed fight where both sides beat each other to a pulp, and it never pretends it's an equal match. Frank gets his shit rocked. Kevin Nash, who played the Russian, never says a word, but his presence and body language sell the character perfectly to the audience. He's enjoying every second as he beats Frank lifeless. There's even a famous story where he actually was injured on set. Yeah, when Frank stabs the Russian in the shoulder, that actually happened.
What? How does that happen? How does that happen, guys? It's supposed to be a prop. What do you mean you're using real knives? What? Oh my gosh. Hey, people are gonna die like that.
Screwed up on set and forgot to replace the knife with a
How do you forget? Oh my gosh.
dummy blade, so the poor guy's shoulder was actually stabbed.
That's his real blood. I hope they paid him more money for this job because... oh gosh.
And the best part, he kept going. The guy acted through it and stayed in character, even though he was damn near killed in the scene.
I would be like, cut. No. I did not sign up for this. Okay? I need to talk to my lawyers. I need to talk to my lawyers right now. I did not sign up for this.
Which definitely makes you wonder if some of those punches he threw at Jane had some real force put into them.
I'm sure it did.
I mean, it's a 6'10" wrestler built like a brick shithouse that you just stabbed in the shoulder for real, and the scene involves him beating your ass. Yeah, that probably wasn't a fun day for Jane. That's actually not the only accident that happened on set that stayed in the movie. Later, when Frank's neighbor Joan is stitching his wounds, the actress accidentally stitched up Thomas Jane for real.
Accidentally? Hey, yeah, this movie. I need to watch it.
He stayed in character through it, but yeah, people literally bled for this movie. You gotta respect that. Now, I mentioned earlier this movie was criticized for having too much humor in it. Nowadays, you hear that and you have flashbacks to 5-minute improv scenes where the actors are puking out as many quips as possible and talking over each other. You know, a modern Marvel product. But funny enough, that's actually not the humor in 2004 film. It's very dark humor. Ironic situations, bleak absurdities, and quips from Frank. During the Russian fight, the entire thing is juxtaposed against Frank's neighbors cooking dinner, gleefully enjoying their day while listening to classical music, and all the while Frank is right next door fighting for his life. The neighbors in general are meant to be the comic relief, the humanity that Frank is trying to cut out but won't leave him alone. They're based off characters from Welcome Back Frank, but toned way down and made into believable people, because in the comic they're meant to be complete jokes you do not take seriously. Frank kills the Russian by having Bumpo sit on him. The movie versions are far more human, and actually pretty likable. Yeah, they're a bunch of spastics and weirdos, but that's why you like them. Despite being weak and beaten down by the world, they still see the good in life, and this ends up being an emotional through line the movie references from time to time.
I'm sure they become an anchor for Frank, you know, as he is lost in his pursuit for revenge and the fact that he has lost his family. I think the people who live in the same apartment complex that he's living in are like an anchor for him. They keep him steady. Yes, he's still bent on revenge, but he's not going to lose his humanity in that process, because there's people around him who talk to him, who are his friends. They will never replace his family, but you could say that they are a part of him still, you know, very close to his heart, probably. Yeah. So these people in this complex are like his anchor.
All Frank wants is to be alone and plan out how to get his justice, but his neighbors want to break through to him. They want to help this guy they see as another odd loner, even if they're complete strangers. Hell, the scene where Spacker Dave is tortured embodies this to a T. Even though the guy is put through horrific agony, and all he has to do to make it stop is tell the mob where Frank is at, he doesn't budge. This complete nobody Dave has no obligation to help, yet risks his life to save because, as he put it,
You're one of us. Your family.
Yeah,
Wow.
this movie uses humor in a way that a lot of Marvel projects forgot how to do. Humor is to endear you to characters so you're emotionally invested for when things get dire. You don't want to see Frank's neighbors die. They're good people. A little awkward, a little goofy, but good people nonetheless.
And you emotionally invest yourself into their lives as well. You know? Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So that you actually feel it when they are suffering, when they are being tortured. You know, you don't want that to happen to that person, because you know you've seen them from the beginning of the movie up until towards the end, and you know you see the type of relationship they have with each other in the building, the type of relationship they have with Frank or the Punisher, and you know you have this vested interest in their lives, and that's good. It's good that the movie is able to widen your spectrum of focus. You know, you're not only focusing on Frank and what he's doing. You're also focusing on the people around Frank and how they keep him afloat, how they keep him anchored. And if those people are also important in Frank's life, then definitely you would also invest into them. Yeah, that's good.
And their influence rubs off on Frank. He moves on from just gaining vengeance to wanting to protect the innocent. He isn't just killing criminals because they fucked him over, it's because they hurt good people, like Joan, Dave, and Bumpo. They're too weak to stand up for themselves and need a guy like Frank who can help. The comic relief characters weren't just included because they need to eat up runtime and break tension with jokes. They have an actual impact on the story and help solidify the protagonist's character arc.
Good. Good.
You cannot think the humor's funny. I don't personally think it's the most hilarious in the world, but I guarantee this looks like Shakespeare compared to the shit we get in Marvel movies now. The idea of something with this label, using grounded, subtle humor that actually fits with the story and actually has an impact on a larger plot, is probably mind-blowing to people that only know late-phase MCU. Now, Punisher 2004 has a ton of elements that make it stand out from the crowd in regards to comic book films. The grounded tone, gritty violence, spaghetti western influence, Punisher 2004 does whatever it can to not be your average comic book flick. Something I definitely think works in its favor.
Wait a minute. What did I just see there? Did the Russian just take a dumbbell and he hit Frank's hand with a gun? Oh, okay. Isn't his hand broken from that type of situation? Oh, okay. I need to watch the movie. I need to watch the movie.
Especially considering the character and the direction he was going in around the time it released. Some people weren't fans of how vulnerable Frank is in the movie, though. He gets his ass kicked 8 ways to Sunday and has to rely on psychological tricks to set up situations in his favor.
I mean, that's good. It just shows you that he is human. He's not some superhero with superpowers or just beyond reproach. No, he's a human being. He bleeds just like all of us. And once he takes to the field, taking out those who have taken out his family, his life is on the line. He's risking his life. And that's a hero to me. Not these ones that were saying, yes, I like them too. But I'm much more grounded in reality. And the Punisher really, he is echoing reality and not this fantasy of people flying around and going into space without a spacesuit and shooting lasers out of their eyes and blowing ice cold ice out of their mouths, and having knives coming out of their fists. This is much more grounded. This is much more believable. And just because he doesn't have superpowers does not mean that he can't be a superhero or an anti-hero, as TheAlmightyLoli has described the Punisher. So yeah, I like this. I need to watch these movies.
And there's a heavy emphasis on showing how the death of his family traumatized him. A chunk of fans just wanted the living Wraith Punisher like he is in Max, a Terminator driven to do nothing but hunt after evil.
That'll be boring. That'll be one-sided, and it wouldn't be fun. We have had a lot of movies that focus on the character just blowing up stuff and killing people, and I mean, we get that all the time. At least let us get someone who is experiencing his past in a very painful manner, and what is fueling him, what is pushing him forward in getting that revenge. If he is suffering through that post-traumatic stress of his family being killed that way, then let us see it. That's very important. It's like, for example, Mass Effect 3, when Shepard was trying to save a child that was also running away from the Reapers when they were invading Earth, and how the child's shuttle was destroyed by a Reaper destroyer, I think. How that image imprinted onto Shepard's mind, to the point where he would dream about this child, chasing after this child, trying to help this child. And then towards the end of the game, he finally was able to, hug and embrace this child. And, throughout the entire game, you could see that this point where that child's shuttle was destroyed really changed Shepard's perspective on, what it meant to try to save the galaxy from the invasion of the Reapers. How much of a mental toll and stress it put on to Shepard. These are the things that we need so that we can further invest in the character, that we can further understand in the character. And with Frank, or the Punisher, it's also very important, especially when you want to understand, you want to invest yourself into this character. You need to know their background. You need to know what makes them tick. You need to know what is still causing so much pain in their hearts. Yeah, so it's important. It's very, very important.
But considering this meant to be a debut movie for the character, and he's trying to sell a more real version of Frank, it makes perfect sense. And I'd say nothing the movie does ever betrays Frank Castle or what he's supposed to be. If anything, I'd say this perfectly matches the tone of a Max or Knight's era Punisher story. In fact, I'd say this isn't just good in spite of the production issues, of which there were a lot.
Oh my gosh.
The director has been very open about that over the years. This is just a great movie, period. I'll never understand the complaints that it's cheesy or has too much humor in it. I just plain don't see it that way. The only complaints I have are purely out of being a fan of the character and finding some of the changes a tad wonky.
The only complaint I have is that the people who are supposed to be managing the props in this movie, you need to be suspended. You need to be suspended. Using real knives, using real surgery tools for a stitching. Come on, guys.
Like Frank being former FBI when he was purely in the military in the comics. And that's Moxnick's anyway, since he was ex-military in the movie, straight up former special forces and counterterrorism. So if anything, it's a weird mix of his backstory from Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, since he was former SWAT in that, and Max. The point being that Punisher 2004 is a slept-on masterpiece of a movie, something Punisher fans need to watch at some point in their lives, even if it's just to say you've seen it. And hell, if you don't believe me, the Punisher game includes direct references to the film, including the fight with the Russian in Frank's apartment.
Whoa.
You could argue that's more of a Knight's reference, but no, fuck you. And
I don't know if I can play the Punisher game, the PlayStation 2 game, I'm not sure about that. But the movies, I'm definitely there for that. Yeah.
Thomas Jane provides the voice work for Frank again.
Quite a time you've been having lately, eh, Castle? How many people have you killed in the last few weeks?
Not sure. There were a lot of explosions.
Also, just to get it out of the way because this does exist and people will be mad if I don't talk about it, Thomas Jane reprised the role as Punisher for a short film called Punisher Dirty Laundry. It's just a quick little 15-minute thing, but it's still a fun little fan service movie if you're a big fan of Punisher. You know, you get to see Thomas Jane wear the skull one more time, even if he doesn't actually wear the skull in the short film, but whatever. Anyway, the Punisher 2004 film kicks ass. It has a ton of great moments and scenes that show they fully understand the character, and the scenes where Frank guns after the mob are endlessly satisfying. John Travolta, despite probably not giving a single shit, actually gives a great performance. He's an utterly despicable asshole, one that does have a strange sense of loyalty to his family, all the while being a full-blown murderous sociopath. In regards to comic book movie villains at the time, he's actually one of the more believable ones. He's a pissed-off father that wants revenge for his son's death, a sort of dark mirror to Frank, who also suffered the death of his family, something Frank taps into with his revenge plan, tearing his life apart piece by piece and pushing him to, ironically, kill the ones closest to him. It's a story of two hurt men that want to rip each other to pieces, and they do exactly that. The relationship Castle has with Saint is one of the highlights of the film. They both act as this inescapable presence neither can escape from, hounding each other left and right until it all blows up, figuratively and literally.
You killed my son.
Both of them.
Now,
Oh, damn. No, I need to watch this movie. I need to watch it. Oh.
I could keep gushing about Thomas Jane's Punisher, it's seriously a good movie, but let's move on to the next chapter. It's a tad more sloppy. So despite the 2004 Punisher film coming out to middling reviews and not an amazing box office return, it still developed a loyal cult following, much like the Dolph Lundgren movie, and the demand for another chapter for the Punisher was sky high. Punisher 2004 was directed by John Hensley, and he was able to keep the character chugging along just long enough for 2008 to come, when Punisher Warzone was released. Now, Warzone is a very different beast from 2004 in a lot of ways. While the Thomas Jane Punisher was a slow-paced, character-driven thriller, Warzone is just a straight-up action movie. It's a lot more fast-paced, violent, and shameless with everything it does. The gore is cranked up to 11, and it couldn't give two shits about much else. It also serves as a full-on reboot instead of a sequel to the Jane movie. Again, Warzone actually leans closer to the comic material than the 2004 film. The setting is back in New York, the picnic in the park happened, and multiple characters from the comics are included, from Micro to Jigsaw to even lesser-known characters like McGinty, Detective Soap, and the Bullygats. Now, the film was directed by Lexi Alexander, a former MMA fighter and stuntman, and you feel that in Warzone. It's a very physical movie. There's a ton of stunts and fight sequences, a major contrast to Punisher 2004 that had to scale back on a lot of the violence due to budget and time issues. This movie is far more energetic and bombastic, despite only having a budget of $35 million, which is pretty much the exact same that 2004 had. It's able to use the money in a way where it emphasizes action above much anything else, including the writing. And the acting. Yeah, let's get this out of the way. Punisher Warzone is a hilariously cheesy movie. Like, it can put the Lundgren movie to shame in certain parts on the cheese factor. The acting is wonky beyond belief, with some actors sounding like it was their first role, and there's some lines in the movie that just make you physically recoil.
Who punishes you?
However, that's also a big part of charm for fans of the film. Yeah, it's cheesy. Yeah, it's mindless. But that's kind of the fun. It's a shameless action flick where you see bodies drop and fake heads explode. It knows that, and you know that. And that's
I'm still gonna watch this one too. I'm gonna watch it too.
not to say it's some irredeemable mess that shouldn't be watched. No, it's actually a lot of fun. There are good elements in the film, like the guy that got to play Frank Castle himself, Ray Stevenson. Ray Stevenson was actually a great pick as Frank Castle. Sure, he doesn't have that humanity and dry wit that Thomas Jane had, but Stevenson more than makes up for it in his own way. This is a Punisher that's been operating for 5 years now, a guy much more adjusted to his new role as the Grim Reaper of organized crime, so it makes sense he would lean into being more stoic and joyless.
So I guess he doesn't live in an apartment building with other with other people, and they share the same building and become family. He doesn't have that type of background here. Okay.
Stevenson, as his main point, looks a lot like Frank Castle. I mean, the guy's an absolute unit, covered in muscle and standing at 6'3". He's pretty much the Max era Frank if he was brought to life. This is also helped by how Punisher is decked out in heavy combat armor in the movie. The dude is a walking tank you do not want to fuck with. So sheer presence alone gives Stevenson a good spot among the guys who have adapted Frank Castle, and they make good use of his physical attributes. Every fight with Frank has him acting like a berserker Viking or like a pissed off gorilla. It's all like the fights you see in something like Reacher. They understand the character is this big motherfucker that can snap a man in half with his bare hands, and make full use of it. Now, the villains of the movie are kind of a different evil from the cold and soulless Howard Saint. Dominic West plays Jigsaw, one of the more famous Punisher villains that's considered his main antagonist, or at least one of them. Doug Hutchinson plays the psychotic, cannibalistic brother of Jigsaw, Looney Bin Jim, and the two gun after Frank Castle after he disfigures Jigsaw by throwing him in a glass-crushing machine.
Oh, so that's what happened to you. Oh my gosh. Oh.
So they go from gang to gang, building an army to finally kill the Punisher once and for all. Frank himself is dealing with a crisis of faith after he accidentally kills an undercover FBI agent that was infiltrating the Mafia.
Wow. Well, this is different.
finding himself drawn to his surviving family in an attempt to make amends. The actual story of Punisher Warzone is pretty light, at least on details that matter. I mean, there's a subplot about biological weapons being traded in New York, but it doesn't really matter beyond a single element towards the end. Also, you have Detective Soap and his new partner trying to investigate the Punisher. Once again, it doesn't really matter. The important elements are Jigsaw, Frank trying to help out the family accidentally widowed, and the growing police effort to find Frank now that he's killed a federal agent.
I think the 2004 video is going to be the one I like the most. Yes, I think it's going to be the one I like the most. The 2008 one and the 1980s one, I think those ones will have to be second. So for what I'm seeing here, I think I'm going to like the 2004 one. Yeah. Because I like movies that have got, you know, a story-driven, narrative-driven characters and characters around the main character. Yeah. With this one, it seems like it's more focused with the shooting and the killing, and that's cool, that's interesting, you know. But something that gets straight to my heart is when you actually delve into the characters, and, you know, you're able to experience what they are going through. I like that.
Obviously, you're not watching Warzone for the plot. You're watching it so you can see a guy doing parkour to rise against get hit with a rocket launcher. It's
I'm sorry. That was funny. That was funny.
a movie that's upfront about its ideas. The plot is simply excuses to take you from action scene to action scene, and I'll definitely say, the action's fun. It's bloody and high octane. Obviously, it's not the most refined stuff out there. This isn't Raid 2 or John Wick, but it stands on its own as a good time. This is the exact movie you put on with friends and just enjoy the gunfire. Don't go in...
Yeah, just order some pizza, have a 2-liter Coke or Fanta Orange, and then, you know, you just close the curtains and you have your big screen TV, you watch. Yeah. On a Friday.
Wanting anything more than that. Now, comics-wise, this is kind of a weird case. Yeah, it's closer to some of the material, but it also makes its own baffling choices, like including the Bulliettes as a faction Frank makes an alliance with, when the Slavers, they weren't exactly that. Jigsaw himself is another weird case. He's a very eccentric villain, completely insane and grandiose with how he handles most every situation. In fact, now that I think about it, vigilante that's been stalking the city for a few years accidentally creates his own villain by throwing him into a vat. Said villain comes back as a sadistic, disfigured maniac. This is Batman. This is the 1989 Batman movie. Obviously, it's not exact, but there's enough similarities that you'll start to feel it if you've seen both. It started to make me feel completely crazy at a few places. They even have a scene where the villain smashes up a museum. This is Batman. Jigsaw is just Joker. This is fucking with me too bad, let's just move on. Obviously, all the spaghetti western influence from 2004 is gone. Instead, leaning on a grungier, almost nu metal type vibe. Multiple scenes and fights feel like they were shot to basically be some kind of metal music video.
Looks like The Matrix. The Matrix Revolution. Yes, the second movie.
Not bad. I mean, it's nice and indulgent. I just don't personally see Frank as a metal character. I know a lot of people talk about how the trailer to the Netflix series used Metallica. I actually think that was one of the weaker parts of it. I kind of prefer a more Western, almost cowboy vibe to Frank. You know, he's meant to be like an Old West gunslinger in modern era. But whatever, it's a personal preference thing. Warzone is a great drunk fun ride, even if it's not the best movie quality-wise. In fact, you could tear this to shreds if you're looking for flaws and things to make fun of. Going off pure objectivity, this is a complete mess of ideas and half-thought-out concepts. But it's also upfront that it's mainly just an excuse to watch stunt guys beat the shit out of each other. If you can stomach bad acting and just want to see blood fly everywhere, watch it. It's like...
Yeah, definitely I'm gonna watch it.
An 80s action flick made in the modern day. Before that was the popular gimmick to do. But from here on, the Punisher went quiet. Warzone also did not do the best. In fact, it did horrible. 2004 Punisher received mixed reviews from critics and only barely made its money back. Warzone was ravaged in the reviews and was a box office flop, only making $11 million off its $35 million budget, making it the third worst performing Marvel movie behind Elektra and Howard the Duck.
Ah, I remember Elektra. Wait a minute. Wasn't the Daredevil in the Elektra movie? Or was Elektra... No. Or was the Daredevil in the Elektra movie, or was Daredevil in the Elektra? I can't remember. But I remember the Daredevil was with Elektra, but she died. Yeah, someone used her weapons against her and she got stabbed in the in the stomach, and then she died. Guys, this was a long time ago. But I remember watching this character and her movie as well. Yeah.
which is not ideal. So Punisher was shelved for a while. This is also where the luster and the Max days were coming to an end, so Punisher sunk deeper into the corner. Fans were still loyal, but Frank was starting to fade away from the silver screen. He still made appearances in the animated stuff, the cartoons and the animated movies, but live-action Castle would go dead silent for more than a few years. There were attempts to bring him back. Fox tried to give him a series, which sounded fucking ridiculous. He would have been a detective that moonlighted as the Punisher, so he was a cop that hunted after criminals. Basically Dexter. I mean, it literally sounds like Dexter. Obviously, this went nowhere. Instead, Punisher would return come the dawn of the streaming service, when Marvel pushed into Netflix with their hit Daredevil series. Now, Netflix Daredevil is widely considered one of the best comic book adaptations out there. A funny irony, considering the last Daredevil adaptation was a resounding
Yes, there she is. Yes, yes. This movie I did watch. So, yeah, Elektra was in the Daredevil movie. Yes. I remember this movie. I remember how she died. I was very heartbroken when she died. Yeah. I haven't watched the series, the Daredevil series on Netflix. I kind of stopped watching Netflix a long time ago. Guys, I don't watch a lot of stuff anymore. You know, I'm focused mainly on YouTube or I'm reading my books. But yeah.
flop. That's a story for another time. Still, Netflix Daredevil revitalized fan interest in the darker, grittier parts of Marvel. Now, it wasn't alone in this. You had also Jessica Jones Season 1 as well, which also blew it up and added some legitimacy to Netflix Marvel. A lot of this was motivated by the fact the MCU was far lighter in tone and meant to be family films. And of course, when you have gritty Marvel, that obviously means a certain somebody's gonna be brought up. Punisher was included in Season 2 of Daredevil, given an entire subplot to himself and acting as a major character for the season. Once again, Frank is rebooted. This time played by Jon Bernthal of Walking Dead fame. He was a bunch of other stuff, but most people at the time knew him as Shane from Walking Dead. And explores Frank right off the heels of the massacre that took his family, gunning for the gangs responsible, with Daredevil desperately trying to balance his rampage with the growing presence of the Hand and Wilson Fisk rebuilding his empire from prison. Yeah, by the way, watch Daredevil if you want any of this to make sense. Still, the obvious thing to talk about is Jon Bernthal's performance as Punisher. It's definitely a highlight of the season, and one of the reasons why he sort of stole the show. The dude has a rawness to him that other variations didn't have. This is a Punisher that's immediately after the death of his family. He is filled with rage. He's a lot less of the cold operator like Thomas Jane, though he still carries himself that way in some scenes. It's just once he's in the middle of a fight, he turns into a brutal animal. A lot of people agree that Bernthal did a great job with Frank. Personally, I don't think he nails the look of Punisher. That's Ray Stevenson hands down. He just looks like Jon Bernthal to me. Still, Daredevil Season 2 understands the mentality of Punisher. He's fully convinced the only way to get justice is to see every man responsible for the massacre dead. There's a lot of build-up to Frank as well. It's easily some of the best moments in the show, but there's a creeping dread as his presence gets larger. The scene in the meat locker where Matt finds all the cartel guys hanging off hooks is fantastic. A lot of the early parts of the season rely on building the mystery around Frank, almost like an Anton Chigurh level of build-up and tension. Then you get the scene on the rooftop where you finally see him break into character, debating Daredevil on the ethics of killing versus Daredevil's tactics of just beating the shit out of dudes. This is actually adapting the rooftop scene from Welcome Back Frank.
Actually, the comic title was Devil by the Horns, but it was part of the same storyline as Welcome Back Frank.
Though it's adjusted to make it far more even-handed and more of an actual debate. It's a scene that's widely remembered as a highlight, just these two polar opposite men screaming at each other over who's right and who's wrong. Obviously, since it's Daredevil's show, he finds a way out of it and stops Frank. Though, it's not a perfect solution. Still, it's a great way to introduce this version of Frank and show his philosophy. He's far more unstable, exhausted of seeing the revolving door of crime, especially after his family was taken from him and he was denied justice.
Only I do the one thing that you can't. You hit them and they get back up. I hit them and they stay down. It's permanent.
Despite his clear, unstable nature, he's not stupid. He's actually scary smart. Multiple sequences in the show revolve around Frank formulating plans in his head and blindsiding Daredevil with them.
I think we can all agree that, you know, all the Franks, all the Punishers are, you know, very clever. They're very cunning. They know how to utilize their brains, or should I say, yeah, they know how to utilize their brains in a way that would make them become successful as a Punisher. You know, you don't want to have your first stint as the Punisher, then you die the next day. No. All of them are good, clever people. They understand how to operate, how to kill, how to make sure that they escape, how to make sure that they continue to put pressure on their enemies or those that are trying to, chase the Punisher. I think we can all agree. All of them are clever, all of them are good, all of them are cunning, and yeah, that's the superpower of the Punisher. He knows how to use his brain. Yeah.
Able to get in and out of a ton of different situations to the point that you really start to wonder what he's capable of doing if he put his mind to it. But he also shows that humanity and vulnerability in more than a few places, like the famous graveyard scene, where he talks about coming home from deployment and finally getting to see his daughter again. There's a good balance between the Punisher that can kill an entire building full of people and the Frank Castle that's a traumatized mess reeling from something no man should ever have to go through. I also really like the dynamic between him and Daredevil. They start off fucking despising each other. They can't stand being close to one another for any time more than necessary. But as they learn more about each other's tactics, their philosophies, there's a mutual respect that forms. They'll never agree, not for a second, but they understand each other. Hell, they even kind of hint towards the idea that Punisher knows who Daredevil is.
Why didn't you take my mask off?
Don't give a shit about who you are.
I know who you are.
At least, it's a small little hint, and they never really address.
I'm sure we heard his voice. Like, I remember this voice. This voice, you're the Daredevil.
It. Daredevil Season 2 all around is a great introduction to Punisher, and his presence in this version of Marvel. It's...
Yeah, I just don't see myself watching Daredevil, the TV series. Yeah. I'll watch the Punisher movies, but I don't know about this TV series. Yeah, sorry.
Very brutal. It's a grim series, and they do not hold back on the brutality of Frank. Daredevil pulls his punches, Punisher grabs the kitchen knife, and they make full use of that more than once. You can tell the...
I will try. I will try. I think I'll just torrent the series. I don't know if I'll get Netflix. Yeah. But I will try.
Writers had a lot of fun with Frank, considering how he ends up becoming one of the major characters in the story. In a lot of ways, it's like a trailer for his eventual solo show. In the good way, I mean. As in, you want to see more of this guy and what he does. Seeing what this version of Frank will be like, and teasing the idea that his family wasn't just killed in a random mob hit. There might be more going on. But that's in a solo show. Which, I mean, I guess I can talk about here. I mean, it's the same universe as Daredevil, so fuck it. Yeah, why not? Screw it. So Daredevil Season 2 ends with Frank faking his death, able to hunt after the gangs that murdered his family without restriction. After he kills them down to the last man, Frank actually gives up the mantle of Punisher, getting a new identity and trying to move on with his life. Unfortunately, he's dragged back into his old ways. After saving a buddy of his from a dirty construction crew, Frank is discovered by this version of Micro, played by Eben Moss-Bachrach. This version of Micro needs his help, as he uncovers proof there's a government conspiracy revolving around Castle's time in Afghanistan. The two develop an uneasy alliance as they hunt for the truth, hounded by a shadowy CIA agent and his goons, discovering that...
And I was just talking about this in the beginning of the video, where I stated that, the Punisher needs to focus on the underworld, the criminal underworld, and that is associated with the criminal justice system, or with the government, or with politicians. And here it is, in a TV series. Nice.
This conspiracy stretches deep into the government and may have been the cause of Frank's tragedy. So the Punisher solo show is strange. It tries to flesh out Frank more than what we saw in Daredevil, showing that he's still haunted by the death of his family and conflicted on whether or not he likes being the Punisher. Now, the conspiracy is relatively simple. The government was smuggling heroin using the bodies of dead soldiers as a way of funding Black Ops. It's a plotline they took from the comic. Frank was targeted as they believed he was trying to leak out information about the plot. The specifics are dipping into spoiler territory, so I'm not going to talk about them right now, but that's big picture stuff. So I've talked about how right the Netflix version of Punisher is, let's talk about the wrong. Now, it's not going to be a complete takedown, trust me, but the Punisher Netflix show definitely has some flaws that we need to talk about. You see, Netflix Punisher has a weird conflict with itself. It seems genuinely terrified of letting Frank be the Punisher, not just for how often he ditches the skull, but his general demeanor and how his stories play out. You see, a lot of the focus is put on the conspiracy. He's mainly fighting dirty politicians, the CIA, and mercenaries. Fair enough, he did that in the comics, but it's something that becomes more apparent in Season 2, which we'll talk about once we're there. Season 1...
Wow, there's like season 2 already of The Punisher? Wow, okay.
Overall is good. Jon Bernthal plays the Punisher well and still holds a lot of his good habits from his rendition in Daredevil. That's not to say there aren't serious problems with it though. Despite being part of the Marvel Netflix wheelhouse, the writing definitely suffered from having a new team on it. It's not as tight as Daredevil, and there's serious pacing issues. That actually ended up becoming a problem as the Netflix shows went on, where they felt like there were 4 or 5 episodes too long, all to accommodate subplots that really weren't as compelling as they thought they were. You see, Punisher Season 1 is a very busy story. There's a lot of factors to pay attention to, at least 4 or 5 subplots alone. You have Punisher and Micro investigating the conspiracy, a Homeland Security agent named Madani chasing after Frank, Micro's family who are convinced he's dead, Frank's buddy Curtis who's running a PTSD support group and is struggling with a mentally unstable member, said mentally unstable member slowly becoming a deranged terrorist, Billy Russo, the man who would eventually become Jigsaw, running a PMC when he learns Frank's alive, Karen Page is there too. You get the point, there's a lot going on. Some of it matters, others really don't, per se. It's weird to say. Everything gets paid off, but a lot of the journey to it feels pointless. The mentally unstable guy is just their attempt at taxi driver. I mean, he literally drives a cab for a job. But it's not nearly as fleshed out as that film, obviously. And the main thing driving his radicalization is this annoying fat guy at the support group, who's mainly there to be a right-wing strawman, just puking out talking points, like saying Jews run the government and the government wants to take away your guns. Actually, let the guy cook, you might be onto something. Still, he's revealed to be a stolen valid prick that doesn't actually believe a word he says, he just wants to feel important. Also, every time he's on screen, I can't stop thinking of The Wire, since he played a character on that show as well, Detective Landsman.
Working, sharing a dark corner of the American experiment.
He's a good actor, and it would have been cool if he, got to be a character. Actually, that's 2 Wire actors that show up in Punisher stuff. That's neat. Granted, the taxi driver subplot is referencing a Punisher story, Don't Fall Down in New York, where a guy that served with Frank in Vietnam has a mental breakdown due to PTSD and goes on a killing spree. The problem is, this is not that story, and it's shoved into a season already juggling a lot as it is. Sure, they tie it into the main plot at the end, but it takes way too long to get to the point, and the kid just isn't compelling to watch. If anything, his struggles with PTSD feel very corny. I know that sounds cruel to say, but it's kind of just goes through an entire checklist of all the cliches of a PTSD story. This tips into an issue the solo Punisher series has that can't really be ignored. For as much focus they put onto the military, they really don't get military culture. Every scene where it talks about Frank's time in Afghanistan is cheesy, exceptionally so. Like, if Terminalist drove you nuts with a cheese, this will look like queso dip covered in cheddar. They do the ooh-rah shit that makes it clear the writing staff definitely never really stepped foot on a base anywhere. Of course, they also couldn't be as vulgar as real soldiers talk because there was a weird restriction on vulgarity in the Netflix Marvel shows. Maybe it was a contract thing, but it's like, you can see heads ripped apart, but no one could say fuck. Of course, the cheese isn't just in the military stuff. Micro's family also has its share of melodrama. Like, did we really need to see a Micro's wife smooching Frank? And
I don't know about that. I honestly don't. I don't know.
having that be an argument?
I mean, we have to believe that they were married, that he loved his wife and his wife loved him. We need to know these things. It needs to be believable.
Granted, that is shut down pretty quickly, but still, it feels a little pandering. Like they're afraid if they never address the possibility, it would feel empty. That's not to say this is bad or impossible to watch, simply that this mindset's very clear. And also shows that this didn't have a lot of money put into it. They were stretching wherever they could. Like, the warehouse where Frank kills a bunch of terrorists is the same one Russo used for his mercenary business. It's also Micro's hideout. Well, to be fair, the Micro hideout thing was actually a plot point for that. But I'm also pretty sure they used the same set during a shootout between mercenaries and the FBI, and Frank killing a bunch of terrorists. Yeah, once you see it, you're never not going to see it. There's a lot of warehouses. But whatever. I mean, budget issues in a Punisher adaptation say it ain't so.
I mean, I've watched science fiction TV shows that use the same, prop sets for different, scenarios or storylines. So, it's fine.
Problem is, at multiple points, it stops feeling like a Punisher show and feels more like a political drama you'd see on AMC or USA. It has good actors, it's just they can't really escape the traps the script set. Granted, they still hold Punisher in a lot of reverence. He has multiple moments where he's allowed to steal the show. One episode ends with a montage of news stations all freaking out as they realize Frank is still alive, allowing it to sink in how much of a big deal it is the Punisher is back. His chemistry with Micro is also a good highlight. The season's all about their growing bond, and it pays off on the build-up in a ton of ways. The two feel like brothers by the end. They fight and squabble, sure, but they have each other's backs. And Frank truly wants to reunite Micro with his family, seeing it as his chance at redemption after failing to save his own. It's a good way of handling this aspect of Frank. He can move on from the death of his family by saving another. Now, Russo's role in the story is interesting. Most every version of Jigsaw just has him to be some mob guy that was disfigured by Frank and wants revenge. The show makes it far more complex. He was Frank's best friend and served with him in the military. After leaving the service, he started PMC, which became a roaring success.
I remember this guy from, it was from a Netflix show. What was it? Shadow and Bone, I think. Yeah. Good actor.
However, he also got in bed with the CIA, and he was involved with the heroin smuggling. And Russo was fully aware of the plot to kill Frank's family, and he did nothing to save them. So even though he's still very friendly with Frank on the surface, and actually tries to help him in some small ways, he is ultimately a bad guy. I think this version of Russo works. Yeah, you can see the betrayal coming from a mile away, but they still give you time to see there was a friendship there. So when the betrayal happens, it genuinely rattles Frank, and he becomes obsessed with killing Russo and the man who started all of this, Rollins. Now, Rollins is an interesting character. He's based on a guy from Max, a completely amoral CIA agent responsible for all sorts of horrible shit that happens in the storylines, from betraying characters to setting up terrorist attacks. Now, the Netflix show downplays his insanity a lot. He was horrifically vulgar in Max and gave zero shits. Yeah, this version's a lot more cold and put together, more the general company man than anything that leaned into full-on crazy. Though you definitely see, it's buried in there. In regards to villains, he's alright. He's not amazing, but he's decently hate-worthy. He does a ton of shady stuff, and it's satisfying once Frank actually gets his hands on him. Still, he can feel like a pretty generic bad guy more than once. Now, I mentioned her before, but Agent Madani is sort of meant to be the second protagonist of the story. She's investigating the Punisher and finds holes in the case that make her question some things, like what exactly happened to Frank's family and did he really die in the shipyard? As she investigates, she finds leads are turning up dead, and her bosses want to shut her out as much as possible, even stumbling into the conspiracy herself unintentionally. Also, she has sex with Russo. It's a
Yup.
thing, but not really worth mentioning. The point is she's slowly growing to understand Frank and how he became the Punisher, even realizing that he's useful to get to places nobody's willing to try. It's interesting to see Frank in this position. The average Joe is terrified of him, and the cops obviously want to arrest him, but the government sees him more as untapped potential than just a violent criminal. Once again, this is a plot point taken from the comics. On a few different occasions, Frank has been used as essentially the government's hitman, though it's often coerced or outright forced. He doesn't like working with the feds that often, especially in this case. Another plot point I should bring up is actually a strange one. You see, a recurring side character in the Netflix Daredevil series is Karen Page, a character from the comics, played by Deborah Ann Wool.
Hey, I remember her. From that vampire TV show. Oh my gosh, what was it called again? I forgot. Oh my gosh. But I remember her. Yeah, good actress.
A paralegal assisting Matt and Foggy, who winds up usually getting dragged into situations way over her head, due to her propensity to finding the truth and refusal to just let things go. Well, in Season 2, she's actually the one leading the charge in investigating Frank Castle, even developing a sympathetic bond with the man, though some people call that Stockholm Syndrome. Anyway, she ends up spending more time with Frank than she does with Matt. She even leaves the practice and becomes a journalist because it gives her more freedom to investigate around and dig for the truth about the Punisher. Also, Matt was dealing with the whole thing of the office being humiliated by the Punisher trials since Frank torpedoed his own case. Also, the hands were being dicks again, Elektra showed up. Once again, watch the season if you want the full context. Still, Karen ends up sort of latching on to the Punisher. A big reason for it is because she herself was forced to kill somebody to stay alive during the events of Season 1, so she doesn't completely vibe with Matt's philosophy of non-lethal tactics. Yeah, Daredevil can kick the asses of a whole room full of goons without much trouble, but that's because he's trained himself to a level beyond most every other person, not to mention his superpowers. Meanwhile, the average New Yorker is stuck just trying to keep their heads down, and when push comes to shove, there are situations where they just need to do what they need to do to get out of a problem. They don't have the luxury of trying not to kill their attackers. Either you cap this guy, or you don't get to go home. So for her, the Punisher ends up being this mystifying figure. She understands his mindset and even sort of agrees with it, because she knows Frank isn't just a lunatic serial killer, he's got a code. Even
she has become an apprentice. And Frank is the master. Yes.
if it makes zero sense to others. And Karen is actually brought into the Netflix Punisher series as a recurring character, one of Frank's allies that goes to bat for him. The taxi driver subplot even revolves around Castle having to save her after she's taken hostage during the assassination of a gun-grabbing politician. They even take it a step further, with that whole episode being a sort of Rashomon-type deal where everyone is giving their side of the story on what happened, and while everyone paints Frank as this villainous figure that came to cause chaos, Karen paints him out to be almost like a superhero. He swoops in and saves the day and even gets her out of danger. Yeah, the Karen stuff is a tad odd, mainly because they seem to be implying a sort of romantic dynamic between her and Frank. It's one of those choices that I guess isn't bad per se, but can definitely be weird for a Punisher fan.
I was just thinking that they will have a master and apprentice relationship. But if they're gonna fall in love, okay, fine, that's also okay, I guess. But I was expecting something like a master and apprentice. She would become the next Punisher. After he has retired, she would take the reins. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, let them fall in love. That's also nice, I guess.
You're so used to Frank not getting close to anybody and living as this cold visage of death that seeing him get a love interest, especially one that's mostly known as a Daredevil character, can make you raise an eyebrow. That's not to say he hasn't had a love interest before. I mean, hell, he outright asked Elektra out on a date once. And even in Max, at his...
Really? I thought Elektra was infatuated with Daredevil. Well, in the movie, that's what it, kind of showed with the Daredevil movie. But in the comics, it's the Punisher and Elektra. Wow.
His most inhuman, Frank got with that CIA chick, O'Brien. They even had a kid together. And hell, Marvel Knights had Joan, with the 2004 movie even referencing that with the failed romance between her and Frank. But Dave and Bumpo trying to get the two together, while Frank mainly just wants to keep to himself. He knows it's dangerous to get close to anybody. It is a thing to get Frank a girl sometimes. I just find the Karen stuff in Netflix Punisher a little odd. It's too melodramatic for its own good. There's
okay. Okay, TheAlmightyLoli. Okay.
Multiple scenes where the two are together and they kind of beat you over the head with the whole, do you get it? They have a connection but can't be together because of Frank's past, but Frank still kind of cares about her. Now, that's not to say the actress did a bad job. Deborah Ann Woll is pretty good as Karen. I like her. It's just one of those things where the solo Punisher series kind of fumbles the writing a tad on the matter. It's part of that whole thing like when Micro's wife tries to mac on Frank. Hell, season 2 even implies Madani has some interest in the guy.
TheAlmightyLoli, do you have something against romantic relationships with that? Oh gosh. Oh man, he's a human being. Let him love, okay? Let him have love. Let him have intimacy with someone he loves. Yeah, let us celebrate it. There's nothing wrong with this. He can't be yours, okay? TheAlmightyLoli. He can't be yours. He can't just be, some dude who's always fighting and investigating. He also has to have a romantic repertoire, if I can say that. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly there. But yeah, let the man be happy. Let the man be happy with someone.
Never really thought of Frank as a ladies' man, so seeing it pop up as often as it does in the show feels a tad indulgent. I don't know, maybe some people really wanted Punisher to get a harem, but I like Frank when he struggles to connect with others. Despite everything, he's a solitary man, a loner that knows it's dangerous to try to get close to others, and doesn't really have much interest in doing so in the first place. He's a ghost. Obviously, if you're...
Even solitary men, or men who seclude themselves from society, they have needs. Everybody has needs, and some people, they would show their real selves, or they would, open up themselves to people who they are infatuated with. That person would radically change, you into a different person because you feel this attachment to them, because you feel this emotion of love, for instance. Once you are hit with that type of emotion, things change. You're no longer this secluded and quiet and just dejected person. When love hits you, you'll be pulled out from that situation and you will show yourself in a different light to someone you feel, emotionally connected to. It's perfectly natural. It's perfectly okay. The fact that Frank is a Casanova of some sort, it's just the way it is. The women are interested, and he is also somewhat interested. So, what can be said? What can we do? It's just human nature there.
making a show about the guy, you need to have a fleshed out cast and people to interact with. I actually like his buddy Curtis. I think that's a really good character. Just hoping that later versions nail the writing if they want to tackle an idea like giving him a woman to be with. Since the Solo series leans too much into cliche and melodrama for my taste, the scenes when he's with Karen can lean a little bit too much into Frank being a bad boy she can fix, than, you know, him being a violent vigilante that tortures people to death. Though I will say it's absolutely hilarious that Frank cucks Daredevil. I will not complain there. Also, just for full disclosure here, despite my gripes, I still like Season 1 well enough. I actually think it's a pretty satisfying watch. The main problem with Season 1 is that I think it's too stretched out. It has maybe 4 or 5 too many episodes. If it cut down on the fat, you could have had something very satisfying. I will not deny, once the show reaches the second half, it gets a lot better. The pace really starts to pick up and things start feeling a lot more intense. And hell, the final 2 episodes are fantastic. The sequence where Punisher has to fight off a bunch of goons in Micro's hideout is actually really fun. It is the exact kind of thing you were wanting to see in a Punisher show. And later on, when he's tortured by Rollins, that's just an awesome sequence. It feels very climactic, like this is the end of the story. It's all coming to a head now. And when he finally gets his hands on the guy, it is extremely satisfying. You can just feel Frank venting out every single ounce of rage and fury and sadness within him onto this poor motherfucker. The soundtrack is actually one of the more hidden highlights, which is especially helped in this scene in particular. Tyler Bates did it, and he's done a bunch of different scores before. He did a lot of the music for Logan as well, and he actually understood that sort of spaghetti western vibe you're supposed to hear with Frank. There is a lot of acoustic guitar elements. There is a sort of country twang to it all. Granted, all the licensed tracks can be varied. I mean, you have everything from Tom Waits to Marilyn Manson, but that's licensed stuff. I'm talking solely like original soundtrack stuff they composed for the show. Still, the point is the actual finale endgame of Punisher Season 1 is probably the best material of the show. Hell, I'd argue it's some of the top stuff in the actual Netflix verse for Marvel. It feels like the end of a journey, like Frank is finally able to close out this loop in his life. They even make it clear just how vulnerable the guy is. I mean, he's almost beaten to death. I don't think a single episode goes by where he doesn't at least have some kind of bruise or black eye on him. They really make it clear Frank is human. He's not Luke Cage. He's not Jessica Jones. He's not even Matt Murdock. He can get hurt, and he can get hurt really, really bad. That is sort of what makes the finale stuff so compelling. Yeah, you know Frank's not going to die, but scene by scene, you are kind of taken along for the ride, because he could get fucked up. He could get seriously injured. I mean, anything could happen. He gives off this vibe of an underdog that a lot of the other Marvel shows just don't really seem to get. I mean, Daredevil's able to get it more than once, but even Daredevil at least has support of the police. Frank is hunted by every single faction at every step, from the government to the local police. I mean, there's not really many friends he can turn to. He's all on his own. It's why I say, despite the flaws of which it is flawed, Season 1 is good. I like it. I can still go back and watch it pretty easily. Granted, I usually forget a lot of the early episodes, but that's just because, as stated, probably could have done some trim in there. Also, that taxi driver subplot really just... Nah, you can cut out half of that and it doesn't even matter. But I will complain about Season 2. A lot, in fact. You see, Season 1 of Punisher, while flawed, has great moments to it, and you'll come off it being relatively satisfied.
Was he tortured? Oh gosh.
Hell, it even gave a definitive ending for the character if they decided to just retire this version of Frank. He joins a support group to tackle his trauma and put his rage behind him. If they want Punisher to move on, that's a pretty good way to do it. He's surrounded by guys who won't rat him out and respect what he did and what he went through. The people that killed his family are all dead, and Russo got a facelift.
Oh, does he become the Jigsaw?
The government even promises to leave Frank alone. Really, it does feel like Frank's journey is at its end. There's nowhere else to go. So Season 2 has to find a new reason to bring Frank back into the fold and give him new enemies to fight. Frank has moved on from his time as the Punisher, traveling the country and just enjoying what time he has left on Earth. He even shacks up with a bartender chick for a bit. Once again, they really wanted this version of Frank to have James Bond levels of game.
TheAlmightyLoli. Oh gosh. You're obsessed with this, man. You're really obsessed with Frank being a Casanova. Oh my gosh.
At least in this case, it's just more of a fun romp and not really anything serious. But still, it's weird how it keeps popping up. Anyway, he knows... This is a young girl being chased by bad men and gets involved. There he discovers that she's being hunted by bad guys, so Frank takes it upon himself to protect her. Alright, Lone Wolf and Cub with Punisher, not a bad idea. Well, this is where you get into the problems. The issue is that Season 2 just sort of meanders from episode to episode. Season 1 had pacing issues. Season 2 kicks that into overdrive. Long stretches of episodes can go by where not much is really happening. It's very clear the writers were struggling for ideas with the season and probably were forced to stretch this into 13 episodes when it really should have been 7.
Maybe they should have taken more time in doing the season before they executed it. Yeah.
Maybe 8 at best. And really, it feels like the opposite issue of season 1.
I think we need to go back to the times when seasons were, at least 10 or 15 or 20 episodes long. I think we need to go back to those times. This thing about having only 8 episodes, 5 episodes, 3 episodes, no.
The first season had too many subplots for its own good. Season 2 really doesn't have that much plot to work with. Frank is trying to protect a girl from bad guys while uncovering another conspiracy. And at the same time, Russo's waking up from his coma and plotting revenge. It tries to balance both, but it ends up feeling like 2 completely separate seasons slammed together, and you feel it more than once. Part of why the pacing can feel so slow is because of how unrelated everything feels from each other. At least season 1 had everything pay off by the end, even if the build-up dragged or felt pointless at times. And some of it was pointless. Season 2 legitimately had pointless elements to it. I don't really give a shit Jigsaw's banging his therapist. Also, the design for Jigsaw...
No, you have a problem. TheAlmightyLoli. You have a problem. First it's Frank and he's sexapades. Now oh gosh, I'm serious. I think you have a problem, man.
That's terrible. He has like 1 scar on his cheek.
He doesn't look like that. He should be looking like this.
Say what you want about Warzone, but that is how Jigsaw is supposed to look.
Yeah, that the one in the series just looks like cosmetics now.
A completely fucked up mess where you're shocked he's even still alive. Seeing how limited his design is in season 2 makes me wonder if they just didn't want to fuck his face up.
Yeah, I think that's the point there. They still want to retain, people who like the actor to continue to watch the TV series. They don't want their favorite actor that they are watching to be disfigured, and it might cause them to lose interest in the Punisher and not watch it anymore, probably.
Since you still need to look pretty for the romance subplot.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, for that too. I can imagine. I can imagine if his face was that disfigured, like in the Jigsaw, the Jigsaw in the movie, and then having a sexual scene. Oh no! Oh, that is the stuff of nightmares right there. That would be the stuff of nightmares.
To work, or if the actor still wanted to look good for the camera. I don't know, but whatever the explanation is, this just does not work. The idea of Russo being legitimately traumatized by Frank is
This is actually cool though, with the mask. Yeah, you should have sticked with the mask, but anyways.
Fun, but it once again drags on too much. It plays with the idea that he developed amnesia from the injuries Frank inflicted on him, and that goes on for a while. We already know Russo's gonna get his memories back and try to kill Punisher, and we don't care what happens to him because he's a piece of shit. Dude's an unrepentant bad guy. He did some downright evil things in season 1. Maybe if they played with the idea of him trying to change, it could have worked. Dedicate the whole season to Frank protecting the girl and show Billy only occasionally, but he's genuinely trying to fix his life. Then have him embrace being Jigsaw come season 3. But it could be an issue where the show was cut short, so they had to throw both ideas together in the same season. Since around the time season 2 came out, a lot of Marvel shows were getting the axe by Netflix. Still, it absolutely suffers from this issue. Hell, Frank has 2 rivals in this season. Jigsaw and the mysterious hitman named Pilgrim. The actual idea of the guy is interesting. He's a former hitman that became Amish and moved on, pulled back into the life of crime by the bad guys who were holding his family hostage. That's fun. The problem is that Pilgrim barely shows up in season 2. He literally only shows up so the plot can remind you he exists. And it's super strange, he never tries to coordinate with Jigsaw, the other guy that's trying to kill Frank. That could have been a good way to give him more scenes where he's working with Jigsaw to put Frank in a trap or something like that, like an ambush. Now, it is possible the season would have fleshed him out far more, but they had to make cuts to fit the Russo stuff in, since they knew they wouldn't have another season to do what they wanted. Especially since everything just sort of rushes to the ending come the final episode. Now, the actual conspiracy that's going on feels far less grand and impactful than Season 1. Season 1 felt like a web that covered the entire country. No matter where Frank ran, he would never be safe. Season 2 tries the same vibe, but the actual plot just feels pathetic. You see, the little girl was part of a con-man circle that were trying to blackmail a politician with photos that showed he was secretly gay. His parents are big religious figures, so it would have been career-ruining. So they were
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
killing anyone involved with the blackmail. That's it. It feels like a wet fart compared to the government is running a heroin cartel to pay for illegal operations, and it resulted in the deaths of American citizens.
Yeah, season 1 was far superior in that aspect, definitely.
Hell, you probably noticed how I haven't mentioned Micro at all in this season. That's because he doesn't show up once. I don't even think they mention him.
Oh, he's retired then, in season 2.
He just vanishes into the aether. Granted, his story was done, but you'd think the guy would at least try to reach out to Frank and make sure he's okay, especially after he's arrested. You know, the infamous vigilante that's been hunted by the cops for a while now. No doubt every news station would be talking about how the fucking Punisher is in custody. I don't know, maybe Micro was like, he can handle it. Maybe they just couldn't get the actor back, who knows? But it's still weird, because he was the second protagonist of Season 1, and he's not even considered an option? Still, you get the idea. Season 2 is a considerable step down from Season 1. I flat out don't like it. It feels watered down to all hell. Even the action loses that sort of quick brutality Season 1 had. It feels too acrobatic and showy. You have that whole fight in a warehouse where he's surrounded by Russo's goons, where they try to do this big
Why are Russo's goons wearing masks? Okay.
showy 10v1 battle, but it never feels like it has impact. Hell, it looks more like a dance routine than a fight. The violence just isn't very satisfying, which for a Punisher show is a major sin. Season 1 had a ton of great fights. You had the sledgehammer fight, Frank killing terrorists with his bare hands, the fight in the woods, Micro's hideout shootout, the duel with Billy. Season 2, by comparison, just feels neutered. The only one I really remember liking was the gym fight, and that's because Frank bashes a bunch of dudes' skulls in with gym equipment. All the fights with the mercenaries or Russo's guys just feels cheap and half thought out, which is sad because they try to have fun setups for fights in Season 2. You even get a tribute to Assault on Precinct 13 with a bunch of bad guys surrounding a police station, but it just sort of meanders and keeps repeating the same scene over and over again. Frank says, "Hey, let me go, I can help you fight," and the cops are like, "Nah, you crazy." And that's like half the fucking episode. The season ends with Frank fully embracing his role as the Punisher, which, I mean, that sounds cool. He's burning the skull and guns down a bunch of gangbangers, but nothing about the story really ever feels like he learned that lesson. He just says, fuck it, guess this is just what I do now. It feels like they end it like this because they had to keep Punisher around and sort of hand-waved away the fact that they kept trying to make him give it up. I mean, God, how many times did he burn that fucking skull? Even the way he kills Billy really isn't that satisfying. Russo's shot after trying to kill Madani and is bleeding out in the gym where Curtis runs his support group. He thinks Curtis is coming to help him, but he just told Frank where he was at, so Frank shows up and pops him. On one hand, it is kind of fitting that Frank just says fuck it and shoots him dead right there, but at the same time, this is the guy that knew about the death of his family and did nothing to stop it, the guy that was supposed to be his best friend. Frank would rip this guy apart limb from limb. That
Yeah, like how we saw in Season 1.
was the first fight where it happened.
You can remember me.
A better way of doing the scene is just show Frank at the doorway, then do a close-up as he walks off frame. Leave what happened to audience interpretation, but maybe have Billy scream in agony to make it clear he's killing him. Pay off this rivalry that they built up the entire show. Maybe it's a personal preference thing, but the way the scene does it just feels like they went, there, he's dead, show's over. Season 2, funny enough, feels more like Season 1 of a show than the actual first season. It meanders, it doesn't know what direction to go in, and the story feels too low scale for what it should be. I can easily see some edits to this, removing Madani and the references to Season 1, and just plopping this before that one. Just Frank protecting a young girl after swearing he was done being the Punisher. Maybe he's constantly doubting it, maybe he's kind of ashamed to admit it, something like that to show that he's still conflicted. After the events of the season, he tries one last time to give it up, and that's when Season 1 happens, where he learns what happened to his family and chases vengeance. It really feels like you can make a fan edit to make this the first in the timeline. Frank is essentially just repeating his arc from Season 1. He's the same guy he was at the beginning of the show, trying to distance himself from his past but can't avoid it, still haunted by the death of his family and unable to keep himself from getting into trouble. I think that is part of why the pacing issues sting so bad. It's the same arc for Frank. He doesn't want to get involved with the plot until he's basically forced to, then goes through a shadowy conspiracy while a group of mercenaries try to kill him, but with far lower stakes and far lower scale. For one, the girl Frank is protecting is nowhere near as interesting as Micro. If anything, she's kind of annoying. She doesn't build as much of a bond with Frank as the show tries to act like they do. The only thing kind of pushing it is just the knowledge that Frank lost his wife and kids, so obviously the girl acts like a surrogate daughter he can protect. But Season 1 did that better with Micro's family. While they were melodramatic and a tad gay at times, it still worked far better as the surrogate family for Frank to latch onto and not want to see die. People still reference the nightmare Frank has over the fear of them dying to this day. Sure, it's mostly as a meme, but the point is...
Oh yeah, I've seen this meme, yeah.
People remember them. I doubt anyone can tell you the girl from Season 2's name without Googling it. It's Amy, by the way. Also, the conflicts that Punisher has with Micro feel much more natural in Season 1. They feel like two men conflicting together over what they want. Frank just wants to kill everyone in sight, while Micro wants this to be a lot more strategic and planned out. He needs it to be that. That way he can get to the big picture and he can go back to his family. He has no qualms over Frank killing, it's just the fact that he needs Frank to control himself so they can get things done. Season 2 has a scene where Amy prevents Frank from shooting a pedophile in the chest. Like a dude who actually exploited children and made CP. Frank had a shotgun right to his chest and Amy threw a bitch fit about it. Yeah, that's a way.
What did she say? Because I would not stop him. I would not stop him. What did she say?
To endear people to a character. Just watch Season 1. You can treat it as just a mini-series about the Punisher if you want. It won't be perfect, but it'll still be pretty satisfying. Still, this was the end of Punisher Netflix, and it was a pretty underwhelming send-off for the guy. But by this point, the Marvel shows were fading away on Netflix one after another. Even Daredevil wasn't safe, being cancelled while the team was planning out how Season 4 was gonna go. Sad fate, but Netflix is absolutely insane with its choices at times.
Wow, Daredevil had 3 seasons? Wow. And Punisher had 2.
Yeah, we can't get Season 3 of Mindhunter, instead we get 20 fucking seasons of Big Mouth and Cuties. Great. No wonder I pirate everything from this fucking site now. However, Punisher is not completely gone. You see, Daredevil is planned to get a revival on Disney+, Daredevil Born Again. Kind of a weird title since...
Disney Plus? Huh.
Season 3 was already kind of an adaptation of Born Again, but whatever, fuck it. Now, the timeline of this series is tumultuous. It's been plagued by production issues since it was announced, with multiple rewrites and complete restarts. It just seems like they couldn't find the right rhythm for Born Again, and there was a reason for that. You see, Daredevil was a massively popular show on Netflix. Charlie Cox even outright named as one of the best casting picks for a superhero adaptation since Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. So of course Disney wanted to shove him into the MCU officially. He even has a cameo in Spider-Man No Way Home and supposedly is going to have a cameo in the next one. He even shows up in She-Hulk Attorney at Law for an episode. But this caused a problem. You see, Netflix Daredevil is a very different entity from the MCU. It's dark, it's violent, and it covers pretty uncomfortable topics. Hell, Jessica Jones plays into the plot point from Alias that she was basically raped by Purple Man. The family-friendly MCU would have a heart attack even looking in the same direction as Netflix Marvel. And that's basically what happened. It was first reported that Born Again would be substantially toned down compared to Netflix Daredevil. It would also be lighter in tone, probably to be a lot more in line with the MCU.
Now you can imagine the Punisher. If they try and do that, it's going to be a totally different experience with the Punisher. And you know, that's why I was a bit shocked when they stated that the Daredevil TV series is moving over to Disney Plus. Yeah, I don't know. They are too PG for a show like this. And now this is already clearly evident how, you know, they're trying to shift Daredevil into go in line with the MCU universe in terms of the violence, in terms of how things are shown in the TV show. Yeah, very kid love. You can't have that with the Punisher. You can't, and you can't have that with Daredevil too, I think. Yeah.
Rather than Netflix-era Marvel. Also a very clear contrast to the Miller era of comics that it was supposed to be taking influence from, especially for something called Born Again. So this obviously means no Punisher. Now, they've been pretty tight-lipped on what exactly went wrong during production that caused everything to fall apart like it did, but you could tell what was going on just by the sheer fact of how many actors weren't coming back. Hell, if you want to know something crazy, Foggy and Karen weren't even supposed to show up in Born Again originally, to the point that fans had to come up with a theory that the story took place during the MCU blip and they just got wiped out of existence by Thanos. It was that bad. It's especially nonsensical since the original idea for Born Again was that it would be a lot more of a legal procedural than a superhero show. So the two characters that work right alongside Matt Murdock during his job as a lawyer weren't going to be involved? Yeah, that's a bad sign. Obviously, fans were pissed. Nobody was excited for Born Again when these changes were announced. The entire point of Matt's cameos in Spider-Man and She-Hulk were to A, introduce him into the larger MCU, and B, get audiences used to the idea of a more silly Matt Murdock. His entire cameo in She-Hulk is just him being a one-night stand for Jennifer. But after She-Hulk exploded in disaster, since she was intended as another face for the MCU to replace the old generation of characters, Marvel hit a tailspin. They frantically went back to the drawing board on pretty much everything. They needed to find something, anything, to keep them from sinking like the Titanic. So it was announced that Born Again would be bringing back the old Daredevil Netflix team. They would essentially be given their corner to work in, and Marvel would mostly leave them alone. Even John
Mostly? Just leave them alone, period.
Bernthal announced that he would be returning as Frank Castle. His big stipulation was that he wanted them to respect the character. It seems like Born Again is back on track to recapture the magic of Netflix Daredevil, but it remains to be seen how it actually turns out. I get the distinct feeling it will be okay, but very flawed. All the rewrites and restarts will be felt, and even if they're allowed to get gritty, there's probably going to be a noticeable leash the show can't escape from. This is MCU territory. Even if they let Deadpool go bonkers in his movies, they can't get too wild for fear of upsetting their potential audience. Even if that grit and that edge is what draws people in the first place. There's also some worries on how Punisher himself will be handled. I mentioned all the way back in the beginning of the video that Marvel is sort of ashamed of the character. They want to bury and forget about him, seeing the political climate as too sensitive to allow shameless gunmen like the Punisher have free reign. Hell, Season 1 actually got delayed for a little while simply because of the Las Vegas shooting, and you still see people to this day say Marvel should just retire the guy, that he's too
But guys, we have games where you can run over people, where you can shoot people with your guns, stab them, like stabbing people on the street. And I'm talking about the Grand Theft Auto games. You can do almost anything to people on the street, people in their homes, people in the shopping centers. Like, there's already an entertainment market that caters to this type of entertainment, you know. And the Punisher or Daredevil or any of these other superheroes that are having dark settings, you know, it is entertainment. And there's already a large market that consumes this entertainment. Just because they consume it doesn't mean that they're all going to turn into people who are going to carry a real weapon and start shooting up a cinema or shooting up a school. You know, not everybody is inspired by what they see on the television sets or what they play, on their consoles. Not everything that is violent is pushing people into carrying a weapon and going into public spaces and killing people. That's not how it goes. That's not how it starts. But anyways,
sensitive or fascist to be allowed to be kept around by Marvel. It's to the point they rebooted the character by completely killing off Frank. After revealing the Hand resurrected Maria for, I guess, shits and giggles during that whole time when Frank led the Hand, which no one remembers because that was stupid. Yeah, it's not the first time they've tried to reboot Punisher away from being who he was. So she hunts down Frank, says she always hates him and always wanted a divorce, and then shoots him. Yeah, this is a thing that happened. But still, they replaced him with a guy by the name of Joe Garrison, whose entire gimmick is that instead of the Marines, he was just in S.H.I.E.L.D., but he's still just the Punisher. Especially since if they want to replace Frank with someone that's less toxic, they had the perfect character to do that with, Rachel Elves from the Rucka run. I mean, she was actually pretty fucking fun. She earned the mantle of Punisher. People liked her during that run. They could even score brownie points by replacing the old toxic man with a chick. Isn't that what the kids are doing these days? Replacing all their comic book characters and animes with women? I don't know. I don't pay attention to social trends. Still, the whole point is they didn't even solve the problem. Their big point was that people were abusing the symbol of the Punisher, aka his skull, because you had like cops and army guys wear it. Yet Joe Garrison still has the fucking skull. And Frank isn't even technically dead, he's just in an alternate dimension now, so they're still leaving it wide open to bring him back once the heat dies down and Marvel smells money again. I mean, what was the point of any of this? To get clout on Reddit? Who gives a fuck what they think? And actually, now that I think about it, yeah, it's a good idea they just kind of forgot about Rachel, because, better to be forgotten than flanderized. Yeah, it's stupid. It's ridiculous and stupid. But that's pretty much modern politics in a nutshell. Ridiculous and stupid. No, the Punisher is not a fascist. You don't need to shame the guy to keep him around. He's a pretty universal character, honestly. He can be used to gun after any political side you want, so long as you write them as beyond redemption and deserving of death. Season 2 of Punisher is all about a corrupt conservative politician family, and if you need an example from the comics, there was that issue of Marvel Knights where he threatened to put a bullet in the president's head. Yeah, Season 1 poked fun at an anti-gun politician's hypocrisy. Frank saved his life, but they never pretend the guy was a good person or anything like that, because he wasn't. He was a political grifter. The point is that Frank doesn't tell political stories, he tells human stories of morality, good and evil, and he acts as sort of karmic justice for those that victimize others. How many people that scream about the fascism of Punisher cheer when a CEO ends up in the obituaries in real life? Hint hint. You can use the Punisher for political commentary, yeah, Max does that all the time in fact, tackling issues of corruption in the military, corporate corruption, ineffectiveness of police, human trafficking rings using the system to protect themselves. Now granted, a lot of these subjects aren't actually political in nature, they are just moral and societal issues, not really anything political. Political implies that you could vote your way out of these things, even though all of it's illegal and evil in the first place. The point of Punisher is that he represents the deep-seated rage the average person has when they read an article about an absolute maniac hurting another person. The nursery employee that abuses babies, the teacher that rapes his students, the cop that shot somebody because they thought it was funny. Punisher guns after anyone. Politics be damned. Anyone that thinks Frank is a Republican or a Democrat has never read a Punisher comic. Hell, saying Frank has politics in general is a serious misinterpretation of the character. He's beyond anything like that. He knows it's all a lie, and all that matters is whether you hurt others for your own gain or not. He doesn't play favorites. He's driven to punish evil in all its forms, to prevent what happened to him from happening again, or at least to make sure the men responsible understand the pain can go both ways. So hearing about how Born Again will include a scene where Punisher scolds a bunch of cops for wearing a skull as a symbol, yeah, I get you worried. Hopefully it is good and it's a return to form for Daredevil, but I mean, who knows at this point? Marvel is a sinking ship. They don't have a lot keeping it afloat at the moment. Hell, the only comic really making any progress with sales is Ultimate Spider-Man, which to be fair is really good so far. But that's the Punisher. It's a quick rundown. There's a lot more I could say, but you should read through some of the comics itself. They're great. Even if the nature of Marvel means you can stumble into some serious schlock at times. But you got a good rundown of the adaptations, at least. I mean, the live-action ones. There's more out there, from game appearances, play his PS2 game, by the way, it's fucking awesome.
I don't know if I will be able to. But okay.
To his animated showings. But this video is long enough as it is, so we're calling it here. Punisher's dope. Check out the movies.
Yes, that I will definitely do.
The Netflix show is fun. At least season 1.
That I will try. I will try to do that. Yeah.
1. And Daredevil season 2. And yeah, it can all be a mixed bag, but Punisher films are a good time nonetheless. You'll enjoy the gunfire if not much else. But do you know what else you'll enjoy? Gamer subs, use code TAL at checkout. They've got awesome holiday deals. Christmas is around the corner, assuming this video is actually out before Christmas. Use the code. Use the code. Use the code. Use the code or Punisher will grab the M60. Use the code. But yeah, that's all I can say. I hope everyone has a great Christmas, once again assuming this video is actually out before Christmas. And if not, Happy New Year. Because from here on out, it's nothing but horror. Dark, disturbing horror. Like finding out your local mall Santa is on the news next to missing kids saying last seen with. Until next time, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys. Hey loser, do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're gonna be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's gonna look at you funny. There's gonna be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I'm now making express threats of violence against you If you do not buy my t-shirt, I will call the police, tell them how they're not, you're not buying my shirt. They're gonna plant crack in your house, and they're gonna arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.
I can hear what you're thinking, all your doubts and fears. And if you look in my eyes in time, you'll find the reason I'm here. And in time all things shall pass away. In time you may come back someday to live once more or die once more. But in time your time will be no more. You know your days are numbered, you count them one by one, like notches in the handle of an outlaw's gun. You can outrun the devil if you try, but you'll never outrun the hands of time. In time there'll surely come a day. In time all things shall pass away. In time you may come back, some say, to live once more or die once more. But in time your time will be no more.
Alright guys, that's it. That's it with Marvel's The Punisher, The Man Comes Around, made on the TheAlmightyLoli YouTube channel and requested by Eddie Manson 9655. Yes. I don't know why I have not delved into the Punisher. I don't know why. I mean, I've watched Elektra, I've watched Daredevil, the movies, but I just never got into the Punisher. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've watched all of these other Marvel movies, as many of them as I could, until I lost interest, and DC movies as well, but I just never got into the Punisher. Yeah. But now that I've seen this video from TheAlmightyLoli, I think, especially the movies, the 3 movies, I am definitely going to watch those movies. They look really interesting, and yeah, I want to, experience watching these movies and enjoying it just as much as TheAlmightyLoli has enjoyed them. The TV series on Netflix, like I said it before, I will try. I don't know when will I have the time to watch it, but I will try and see if I can get it and watch it. I don't know about season 2. Season 2 kind of looks half-baked, so I don't know. I don't want to ruin what I might experience in season 1 with season 2. I don't know. I'll just have to wait and see. Also, the Daredevil. I think it's the Daredevil season 2, right? That's when the Punisher was introduced into the series. It would be wrong for me to skip season 1 and just head over to season 2. So I will also try to watch season 1 and season 2 of Daredevil. Season 3, I don't know. I'm not really there for the Daredevil. I'm there for the Punisher. So yeah. Yeah, the Punisher, or Frank, is a very interesting character. He comes from a very painful situation, losing his family, whether it's through government, failure, or it's through mafia, or it's through the failure of heroes, whoever it might be, whatever it might be, whatever the situation that revolves around him and his family might be, he loses his family. And, that just destroys his world. It shatters his, peace of mind. And he is on a rampage. He is on a rampage seeking revenge for those that he has lost, for the loved ones that he has lost. And it's taking a very dark turn in terms of, this heroic or heroism storylines. He's not saving... Okay, he's saving people, but he's killing more people than saving. If I can say that. He's killing more people than saving people. He doesn't have superpowers, which I also like. Like I've stated before, it's also grounded in our reality. He's not really fighting against supervillains who have supervillain ideas and supervillain missions to rule over the world. No, he's just dealing with the underground gangs, the mafias, the politicians, the corruption that is centered around the criminal justice system or within society itself. He's dealing with that type of grit and reality-based situations, something that I can identify with, and not superheroes and supervillains who are flying in the air shooting each other with lasers. No. That's fun for a moment, but then it gets boring, gets very predictable. I like the real gritty type of stuff that the Punisher is showing in its universe. So yeah, I really do like that aspect of the Punisher, the fact that he doesn't have powers, and the opponents that he's fighting against, or even the villain that he is creating himself, the Jigsaw, it is through very grounded, based in reality type of situations. So yeah, that really does fascinate me. There was also a comic book that was focused on the Punisher killing all the Marvel heroes. That sounds interesting. I want to know how he planned to kill all of those Marvel heroes. Exactly how did he achieve it, and how far did he get? Did he kill Captain America? Did he kill who else? Well, the most powerful members of or should I say the most powerful characters in the Marvel universe. How would he be able to kill those ones? That's something I want to know about, something that I'm really interested about to see. But yeah, really, the Punisher does sound like a character that I can identify with in reality, and it's good. It's good that there's a character who, like I've stated before, is identifiable, and we're able to understand his pain, and the fact that his pain is still on him like a huge burden that he can't seem to let go of. That's something that he cannot forgive himself of, something that he cannot fully recover from. And that's real world situations right there, and how it affects him in how he conducts himself with other human beings, how he communicates with other human beings, how he values or doesn't really value the friendships that he has created, and just his life in this complicated, painful situation that he's in. Really, it does sound very intriguing to me. Yeah, so definitely those 3 movies of the Punisher, I will be watching them. The TV series, that is something to aim for. And yeah, really, it's good. It's really, really good. Thanks again to Eddie Manson 9655 for the requests. This has been very, very good. Thank you also to TheAlmightyLoli for making this video, this review on The Punisher. Really, it's been informative, it's been entertaining, especially with your obsession on the, you know, sexual escapades of the Punisher and his best friend, especially from the TV series. Yeah, that was funny. Really, that was funny. And yeah, I really liked how you know, the TheAlmightyLoli focused on the different versions of content related to the Punisher. Really, it's been good. Thank you very much, guys. That is it. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as TheAlmightyLoli's YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, give it a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys hopefully next time with another TheAlmightyLoli video. Yes. Okay. Good night.